Mensch ein Mensch ist, drum braucht er was zum Essen, bitte sehr. Es macht ihn ein Geschwätz nicht satt, das schafft kein Essen her.
Drum links, zwei, drei, drum links, zwei, drei, wo der Platz genossen ist, weil ich heim in die Arbeit einheimst kommt, weil du auch ein Arbeiter bist.
Und weil der Mensch ein Mensch ist, drum hat der Stiefel im Gesicht nicht gern. Er will unter sich keinen Sklaven sehen und über sich keinen Herrn.
Drum links, zwei, drei, drum links, zwei, drei, wo mein Platz genossen ist, weil ich heim in die Arbeit einheimst kommt, weil du auch ein Arbeiter bist.
Und weil der Prolet ein Prolet ist, drum wird ihn kein anderer befreien. Es kann die Befreiung der Arbeiter nur das Werk der Arbeiter sein.
Drum links, zwei, drei, drum links, zwei, drei, wo mein Platz genossen ist, weil ich heim in die Arbeit einheimst kommt, weil du auch ein Arbeiter bist.
Здравствуйте, comrades. Welcome back to Socialism Saturday after a 1-week hiatus. And oh, what a week it's been. Oh, what a week it's been. Oh, what a week it's been. Oh, is he really? Is he really live right now? Is he really? Is he really? We're going to talk about this just briefly, just so he can get his rocks off on it. And isn't it funny? Isn't it funny that oh, yep, there he is. There he is, sniping my stream. You know, Big Tech just can't quit me. But sadly for Big Tech, I'm actually not going to talk about him tonight. But besides one little brief thing, which I'll tell you about, and we're actually going to be laying some ground rules today that if anyone comes in the chat talking about Big Tech or any of that, we're just going to ban them. And they're not going to be addressed because, you know, Socialism Saturday is the flagship stream on my channel. Socialism Saturday is where we do the really good stuff. And Big Tech can whine all the tears he wants to whine. He can cry into his pillow, all he wants. But isn't it sad that some guy who claims that, you know, I'm just stupid and fat and ugly and all these things, like he literally has nothing better to stream but me. And the reason that Big Tech is streaming me, and I promise we're going to go, this is going to be less than 5 minutes. This is going to be a real quick one because I want you guys to know that I was up until 5 a.m. this morning. I'm not even drinking beer right now. I'm still drinking coffee because I was up till 5 a.m. on a stream on Politically Provoked, which is on Cozy, Rumble, all that stuff. It's a Groiper show with Brittany and Mio, and we've mended fences. And, you know, for 3 hours on that show, Big Tech was sitting out in the chat and he was being such a pussy, such a coward. Like, you mean to tell me that you want men to run the world, but you can't come on a stream and talk to someone? Anyway, he sat in the chat seething for 3 hours. And then finally around 3:30, 4 a.m. this morning, he finally manned up and put on his big boy pants and came on the stream to tell me off. And he was going to tell me off good. And if you guys are interested in what happened on that stream later tonight, because we are not actually doing this on Socialism Saturday. We're not doing it on Socialism Saturday. Socialism Saturday is actually for socialism. As it turns out, it is not to feed Big Tech's fragile little ego. But what I have been doing today is I made a video that is the big tech unhinged meltdown from Politically Provoked from last night, with about a 26-minute commentary from me at the beginning, kind of setting the stage for everything that led up to that point and kind of like my thought process around it. And I will be premiering that on my channel at 10 p.m. tonight. And so maybe big tech wants to hang around for that long, and maybe he wants to, react to the stream and all that stuff again for his audience, because he has no other content that he can do, because that's just the way it goes. But that will be premiering at 10 p.m. tonight. It will not be a live review by me. It's literally just I do commentary at the beginning, and then I just play the unhinged meltdown from big tech. And listen, Reagan was there. Did anyone else watch this? He lost his shit. And what he was trying to do was provoke me by insulting me every way he could and all this stuff. And I feel like I just like held it together. Maybe it was just because I was really, 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 really tired. Maybe it was because I was literally falling asleep on my desk at that point. Maybe that was it. But I feel like it worked out well for me. The groypers are all on my side. So here's the thing, guys. Just got here. I watched Big Tech after your stream ended. He was telling people to come in your chat and ask you questions. This is what I want to tell people. We are not entertaining this on this stream. We are not allowing Big Tech and his little girl feelings to disrupt what we're doing. So this is all I'm going to say about him the whole stream. And if people, and especially people that we don't recognize, are coming into the chat and causing problems, I just want the mods to, I know the mods can't ban them, but the mods can put them in a timeout. I will ban them when I get to it. And that's just how we're going to handle it. And we're not going to talk to them on the stream. And if Big Tech wants to keep stream sniping me because it's the only content that he knows how to do right now because he is an obsessed little bitch, then he can do that. But we're not going to give him any more things to react to. I have now said my piece about this. I've been very clear about this. And I think it's clear to anyone with a functioning brain who is seething and who is not seething. And it's kind of like the IQ test, right? It's the IQ test. If you are not smart enough to know that Big Tech is a seething little whiny girl in this scenario, and I'm just like keeping it together and not engaging in his bullshit, then you're not smart enough to be here. You should definitely go over to Big Tech's channel, though. He'll give you all the low IQ bullshit content that you want. And then everyone's happy. Like the high IQ people can stay here. The low IQ retards can go over to whatever platform he's streaming on at any given moment, and they can go hang out with them. See, there's content for everyone on the internet, guys. It doesn't like we don't have to live in a scarcity mindset. There's more than enough for everyone. There's more than enough creators for everyone. And on my channel, we actually want to watch socialism, which is what we're going to do. So 10 p.m. tonight, if you want to see that. And I will probably be hanging out in the chat for at least some of it if you have any questions. And that's all she wrote, folks. This is not going to be drawn out into a big internet war. That's not what I wanted in the first place. But if Big Tech wants to try to do a preemptive strike on me, too bad, so sad, bitch. I got you first. All right, so that's all I'm going to say about that. But because it's been such a tough week, because it's been, I need something that's going to make me happy, all right? And there is no socialism content that makes me happier on the internet than Sophie Lewis. Sophie Lewis, the ginger dragon, our abolish the family goddess. She is everything. And she says the quiet part out loud, and she does it in a lovely way, and she has beautiful red hair, and everyone loves Sophie. And even though Sophie is talking about some of the most dystopian ideas imaginable, we still love Sophie. And this is a stream, we've actually watched this before. This was one of the earlier episodes of Socialism Saturday. And occasionally I like to go back and watch some things that we watched on previous episodes because we've learned so much since we started doing this. Like I started watching socialism really actively in like September of 2022, something like that. And so we've watched a lot of socialism since then, and our knowledge about socialism and all the concepts that they're talking about has just skyrocketed since then. And this is one of the earlier streams that we watched. This is from the University of Pennsylvania. It's from specifically the Andrea Mitchell Center for the Study of Democracy. And one of the things that we need to look into at colleges, and this is something I would actually love to at some point on the wiki. And we need to get back. We all need to get back to working on the wiki a little bit more. I'm talking about myself first. but I really think there's a lot of stuff that we can archive on the wiki that is going to be really helpful for us. One of the things I would like to archive on the wiki is a massive list of like these little tiny little centers that exist at colleges and universities, because really like the craziest stuff at colleges and universities is not necessarily in like the big departments, and it's in these little centers that exist that are funded through grants and things like that, and maybe they don't even have that much money, and it's got like 3 employees or something like that, and there aren't even many people there. And so what I want to do is make a list of like these gender studies centers, these trans study centers, these queer study centers, all of these little things, because what I found is that when you go into like the YouTube channels and the web pages of these little tiny centers, and they have like 3 subscribers, look at this channel. It only has 611 subscribers. This video only has 477 views. Like, it doesn't even have that many. And so like, but this is the good stuff. This is the good stuff. This is the stuff that they say the quiet part out loud in. This is the stuff that is just like, I mean, the most dystopian stuff you're going to find. And it all exists on these little centers. And people might say, well, why are you watching this stuff if it only has like a couple subscribers and a couple views? Like, it isn't that relevant, but it is relevant, because what's going on YouTube is not necessarily like indicative of what of the impact these people have. They're telling you what their ideas are. They're telling you how they're going out there in the world and achieving them. They're sometimes giving us their entire strategy for doing so. And so to say that these centers are not relevant just because they're maybe not getting a lot of views on YouTube, this is literally at the University of Pennsylvania. This is at an Ivy League school. And if it's being taught in a center at an Ivy League school, then we know that it's going to be permeating all of the other curriculum at that Ivy League school. We know the people that are working on it are probably speaking at other Ivy League schools, and Sophie certainly does that. She's spoken at Brown, she's spoken at Cornell. She just did a whole European tour. She lives in New York. She's teaching classes on family abolition. And so it's not about how many views it necessarily has on a YouTube video. It's about us finding the places where they are saying the quiet part out loud, so then we can figure out and reverse engineer how they're showing up in the world. And of course, there is no more dystopian a topic than family abolition. Is this anyone's first time watching Abolish the Family content with me? I know some of you actually watched this with me the first time we watched it. And this is a great introductory video to watch. Based on my recollection, I haven't watched this video probably in a year and a half, but based on my like recollection, this is a really great introductory video for abolishing the nuclear family, which is one of the key things that the far left wants to do. This is where all of the attacks on parental rights comes from. And this is the most scary thing that the far left is doing that literally no one is talking about. So we've got Hannah here for the first time talking about Abolish the Family. I don't think I've seen you here, Vaughn, although did you slide into my DMs and say sassy things to me? I think I recognize you, though. I think I recognize the name. If you didn't, that's fine. Rocky, we've got here for the first time watching Abolish the Family stuff with us. Awesome. I really do think, guys, this is the thing that most people have no idea that's going on, that is going to end up impacting the most people at the end of the day. Yeah, I got you, bro. I got you. I know. I see you. Okay. Don't worry about it. Jeremiah, it's his first time here. Awesome. Offensive Saint says they did do a lot of successful abolishing the family in Soviet Romania. Yeah. We've got Dick here over on X. Awesome. So, guys, if this is your first time watching socialism with me, you might be a little overwhelmed. You might not understand the language that they're using. If you don't understand the language that they're using, it is not you, it's them. Socialists speak in a different language. They speak in a coded language. And so the reason that we watch socialism is because, unlike James Lindsay, I don't think the most productive thing to do is read philosophy papers from 50, 100, 150 years ago from like dead philosophers. I think the most productive thing to do, if you want to know what the far left is doing in the real world today, is actually watch the far left in the real world today. So this is like an immersive learning experience where we are all, following along with what the left is teaching each other when they think that we are not listening, okay? And so this is how we know who the major activists on the far left are. This is how we know who the major organizations are. This is how we know how they're coordinating with each other. And quite frankly, and I know I've got some gripers here, and I want to welcome all the gripers. I really appreciate you guys. I actually think there's a lot that the gripers could learn from the far left in terms of their tactics, in terms of being subversive, because the gripers are already doing such a great job at being subversive, but we can always learn more, right? We can always pick up ideas that maybe we just hadn't thought about before, hadn't considered before. And so I think this is a really good opportunity for the gripers to learn how the left was able to take over so many things. And then maybe they can apply that strategy to what they're doing to be even more effective than they already are. So that's another great reason to do that as well. Yeah, we're gooning the like button now. Exactly. We're mount the like button if you feel so inclined, or goon the like button, or peg the like button, or do whatever you want to the like button. If you want to be more of a platonic friend with the like button, you can blow the like button a kiss, put your arm around the like button, give the like button a high five. Whatever you want to do to the like button is just fine. The like button consents to all, no matter how debaucherous. And I know the gripers are more than a little debaucherous, because they've been sliding into my DMs all day because they're so excited that I owned Big Tech's ass so badly last night. So they've been showing their appreciation in my DMs. I'm just saying, show your appreciation to the like button, okay? That's all I'm saying. So we are going to get into this and watch this in a second, guys. But before we do that, I do want to just do a couple orders of business. Number one, please, as always, make sure you are subscribed to my Substack, Carlyn, KARLYN.substack.com. Currently on the Substack, I've got a 3-part series as part of my Inner Circle podcast where I read the Gender Accelerationist Manifesto. This is a queer anarchist document that was produced in 2019 that is really driving a lot of the gender ideology activism today. And it is scary, and they're telling us exactly where they're going with this, and you don't want to miss this. So this is a 3-part series where I'm both reading and analyzing the Gender Accelerationist Manifesto. You can find that on the Substack right now. It is a supporter-only podcast, so you can sign up for $8 a month, $80 a year. All signups do help to support the work I'm doing and keep me doing stuff like this every Saturday with you guys. And so I would really appreciate that. Also, I did post a new article on my How to Speak Socialist Substack. This is where I'm working out the content for what is eventually going to turn into my next book. Essentially, what I'm doing is I'm taking the basically 2+ years of far left socialist trainings that we've been watching, and I'm synthesizing them into a book, but I'm writing it like a dystopian fiction. I'm writing it like 1984, Brave New World, or something like that. But everything in the book is going to be sourced to real things that have happened in the real world. So it's going to read like a dystopian fiction, but it's all going to be real, which I think makes it even scarier. So that is what I'm working on right now. You can find that at speaksocialist.substack.com. You can access the latest article in the series, which is called Individualism is Dead. And if you are preferring audiobooks, I also do have a podcast that accompanies that, where you can hear me read the article. You can hear me do additional commentary. Just note that this is where I'm literally drafting my next book. So there will be typos. There will be things that I get wrong. I apologize. I'm the typo queen of the universe, but that's just the way book drafts work. And part of the reason I'm doing this is to give you guys, you're going to get instant access to the content that I'm writing for the book, but you're also going to get all of the content. So when you're writing a book, you don't necessarily include every single thing that you write in the final draft of the book, because sometimes you have to do this thing called killing your darlings, where you have to take the things that you love and that you wrote, that you just fell in love with and that are awesome, but they don't fit in with the rest of the book, and you have to edit those, because that's how the editing process works. The content from this Substack will eventually be turned into an actual physical book, but you guys are going to get to see that book created in real time. You're going to get to contribute to that book. You're going to get to offer your ideas, your perspectives, stuff like that. That is speaksocialist.substack.com. And last way you can support my work for tonight is by heading over to the Unwoke art store, picking up some sweet merch. Now, listen, I've been really busy this week. I've had nonsense I've had to deal with. There's been drama. There's been bullshit. There's been all sorts of stuff. And so because I've been really busy this week, don't tell anyone, the Trump American Gangster merchandise is still in the store. I was going to take that out of the store last week, but I was traveling and there was stuff going on. I just didn't get to it all right. So if you thought you missed out on the Trump American Gangster merch, you've got like one more day to get that merch, because it will be coming out of the store tomorrow. If I have to do it during movie night in the Discord tomorrow. By the way, what are we watching for movie night in the Discord tomorrow? Does anyone know? This is how badly I've been keeping up with things. I have no idea what's going on in my own supporter Discord, but someone will know. Anyway, the Trump American Gangster merch commemorates Trump becoming a convicted felon, and it includes, of course, the Trump golden mug. That the Trump golden mugs that I do are like one of the best-selling things in the store, and people love them as gifts, and it looks awesome. Like, people have been sending me pictures of the Trump golden mug that they ordered, and it looks pretty great in person. So you can pick that up along with t-shirts, hoodies, and a black mug. You can also get the latest version of the Unwoke Wiki Plague Doctor shirt, which honestly, I love this shirt. I think it came out so cool. I did like a neon pink lino cut, and it just looks, it's a cool ass Plague Doctor, man. I'm going to be picking up this shirt for myself. This is another limited edition item in the Unwoke art store. Both of these items will be leaving the store. The Plague Doctor will be leaving at the end of the month, which we're like almost there. We're like 1 week away. So 1 more week to get that. And the American Gangster stuff will be leaving tomorrow. And yes, we are watching Jurassic Park tomorrow night in the supporter Discord. So you can come join us at 8 p.m. and we'll be having a movie night for that. And it's going to be great. All right. Do I need to do a preamble about socialism? How many? Again, I know I asked for new people earlier. Okay, here's the deal, guys. This is like a class. If you've never been to my Socialism Saturdays before, this is like a class. You have to treat it like that, because although we have fun and you can shitpost a little tiny bit in the chat, I do really ask that everyone stay focused on the content that we're watching, because it is complicated and there are people here who are trying to learn, all right? I need you to consider that I am the teacher of the class. You are the students in the class, and there's reasons that I try to run this the way I do, because I find that it's the most productive and enjoyable for everyone when I run things like this. We have 2 rules in my chat. Number 1, don't be a dick. Do not insult me. Do not insult other people in my audience. Rule number 2, no whining. If I ask you to stop doing something, just stop doing it, mother effer. That's all I'm asking. I just want things to be nice and have people have the ability to focus. We watch socialism like this because socialists speak in a coded language. They use the same vocabulary as us. They do not use the same dictionary as us. So what we're going to be doing throughout this presentation is breaking down what they actually mean. Especially if you are new to socialism with us, please ask questions. I have a great set of people in the chat who have been watching socialism with me for years. They can answer your questions. They can help you out with that. I will be stopping periodically to help out with that as well. And so if you have questions, please ask them. Please don't make any assumptions about what you think they mean, because oftentimes the stuff you hear about socialism from the right is not actually hinged into reality with what socialists think. So we want to hinge into reality. We want to actually understand their perspective. Please resist the urge to debunk them. Socialists say a lot of crazy things, and it's going to be every fiber of your being to say, that's not what that really means, or that's not the definition of that word, or that's a stupid idea, or don't they know that real socialism has never been tried? Guys, if debunking them was all that was required, we would have already won this battle a long time ago. So please resist the urge to debunk them. Instead, what we want to do is put ourselves in their shoes and understand the world from their perspective, because you cannot defeat an enemy that you don't understand, all right? So with that out of the way, please mount the like button for me. Please make sure you are subscribed to the channel if you are not already. And we are going to dig in with an Abolish the Family classic featuring our favorite Abolish the Family socialist, the Ginger Dragon, Sophie Lewis herself. Get ready for some of the most dystopian stuff you'll ever see on the internet. Let's get this party started.
I think we're going to get our discussion underway. Welcome to the Andrea Mitchell Center for the Study of Democracy. Thank you all for joining us. My name is Miranda Edith Skleroff, and I'm a PhD candidate in the Department of Political Science at Penn. This event is part of the Andrea Mitchell Center's Capitalism, Socialism, Democracy series. Thank you to Dr. Jeff Green and Dr. Matt Roth for hosting us. I'm excited to discuss the book Abolish the Family, a manifesto for care and liberation with its authors, Dr. Sophie Lewis. Lewis is a freelance writer living in Philadelphia, teaching courses for the Brooklyn Institute for Social Research. Her first book was Full Surrogacy Now, Feminism Against Family. Her essays have appeared in many venues, including the New York Times, Harper's Magazine, the Boston Review, and Plus One, the London Review of Books, and Salvage. Lewis studied English, politics, environment, and geography at Oxford, the New School, and Manchester University, and is now an unpaid visiting scholar at the Feminist, Queer, and Transgender Studies Center at the University of Pennsylvania. Today, we will be focusing on her newest book, Abolish the Family. Even though we live at a moment of particular crisis, you may have noticed that when it comes to media coverage, governmental policy, and rhetoric on both the left and the right wing, the family is always in crisis. Writing at this pivotal moment of economic and political upheaval, scholar Sophie Lewis presents a book that speaks both to the role of family abolition and liberation struggles since the 19th century, and also to the present-day fight for care and liberation beyond the family. Sophie, thank you so much for being with us here today.
It's a huge pleasure. Thank you for having me.
Okay, we're just going to jump right in for a Q&A. We'll be having a discussion for about the first 45 minutes, and then we'll jump over for audience questions. Feel free to ask your questions whenever you think of them, and we'll save them for a separate Q&A point. But I think just to start off with, I'm going to ask the very basic question, which is also the title of the event, which is, what is family abolition, and how is it different from how its detractors might present it, and even how people who might hear the word for the first time and what their responses might be? What is family abolition, and how is it a little bit different from just putting those two words together?
Yeah, so I think of abolition of the family as pretty much synonymous with the deprivatization of care in society.
Abolition of the nuclear family is synonymous with the deprivatization of care. Pop quiz for the chat. What does that mean? What does Sophie Lewis mean when she says the deprivatization of care? And for those who are new, this is just how we learn socialism. It's the Socratic method, where I'll ask you guys a question about what they're saying. If you don't know the answer, that's fine. But you will know the answer when we drill it into you, so that you will remember it and learn to hear it in the real world. So family abolition of the biological nuclear family is related to the deprivatization of care. What does that mean? That means universal health care. Exactly. It also does mean, well, they do want to abolish parental rights. They do perceive parental rights to be a form of private property. It means all children being raised by the state. Okay, that's part of it. It means women won't be doing the unpaid labor of caring for the nuclear family. It'll be done by the community through universal health care that's provided by the state. The deprivatization of care, everyone takes care of everyone else. One of the reasons that the left wants to abolish the nuclear family is that they believe that the type of health care that we receive is directly related to who our biological family is. So in other words, if your family has a lot of money, then you're going to receive better health care. If your family is poor, you're going to receive poorer health care. What the far left wants to do is get rid of private health care entirely, no more private doctors, and they want everyone's health care to be provided by the state. That's what they mean when they say deprivatization of care. It means community care. Exactly. Community care. Collective care. Yup. The privatizing of caring for the families does uphold capitalism because it makes care a capitalist endeavor. The care is assigned to the collective. The state provides care. Children are raised by the collective. I cannot emphasize this enough, guys. Under the far left's ideology, you do not have parental rights. You do not have any rights over your kids at all, because they consider that having parental rights means your kids are a form of private property, and they want to abolish all private property. I actually have Sophie on video saying, fuck parental rights. You can find that over on the Substack. Yep, everyone cares for everyone else. Lots of correct answers in the chat. I appreciate it, everyone.
The definition that I think is most important of the family is actually to do with the privatization of care, labor in society. That's perhaps a bit counterintuitive to people who, don't think of the family as, perhaps don't think of it very much at all. In fact, we're not very much used to thinking of the family as a structural phenomenon, let alone a sort of extension of institutions of the state, or indeed an economic site of activity at all, right? But there's an immense amount of sort of ideological naturalization that creates that sort of unthinking that we do every day about what we are doing when we
like newspeak
do the family, and in a sense acquiesce to the private public division in capitalist society, which currently has reached a point of intensification so extreme that even the propertied classes in the COVID pandemic are kind of writing op-eds about how something needs to change on the level of how we live privately, or perhaps too privately. But what I'm thinking about when I talk about abolition of the family actually has a very long history. And I go into that a little bit in my very short book, which we're gathering here today to discuss. And it's a very whistle-stop tour. But
Sophie has written 2 books about abolishing the nuclear family. They're the first one's literally called Abolish the Family. The second one is I forget the name of the second one, but you can look Sophie up on Amazon and find the books.
In some senses, it's been an orthodox kind of Marxist demand, not one that is necessarily remembered by all Marxists, unfortunately, to my mind. But it also has, a really strong history among sort of anti-imperialist, gay and lesbian, Black, third world radical traditions in the sort of so-called red decade of the 60s and early 70s, where, abolition of the family was a very sort of elementary, really quite familiar and well-known element of the overthrow of capitalist society as a whole. So I guess I've basically given you what I think it is. It's the idea that we can reproduce our lives and make people in a way that is much more centered in the common and the public realm.
We can reproduce our lives and make people, which means literally having children, in a way that is much more centered in the common realm, the collective. That's what social reproduction theory is. Social reproduction theory, the real reason that the left wants to abolish the nuclear family is social reproduction theory. Pop quiz for the chat. What does social reproduction theory mean? Let's see. While you guys are answering that, I'll take this question. Why are these advocates for equality always rich and privileged? They're not advocating for equality. They're advocating for equity. Don't they have the most to lose? Aren't their parents shaking their heads and trying to lose their family fortune? Well, you are correct that there would be no more inheritance. There would be no more generational wealth. That is one of the things they want to get rid of. But I wouldn't say that they're always rich and privileged. I think the ones that you're commonly shown in the media are the rich and privileged one. But we've seen plenty of people who are not rich and privileged involved in this movement. So I wouldn't say that that's true. But remember, they don't want equality. They want equity. Equity means from each according to their ability, to each according to their need. It is the redistribution of resources. Equality means everyone gets the same. But they don't want that. All right. Oh, Sophie has a zine called Mothering. Should it be Mothering Against Motherhood or Mothing Against Motherhood? That's funny. All right. What does social reproduction theory mean? Social reproduction theory means that the family reproduces capitalism. That is as long as it stays. Yep, that's right. Social reproduction theory means that society will reproduce itself until it is disrupted. Social reproduction theory states that social systems will reproduce themselves until something disrupts the system. So if you have a system in which society is grounded in the nuclear biological family, and you don't get rid of that family system, the nuclear biological family is going to continue to reproduce capitalism because the kids are going to be born and raised in a capitalist environment. The reproduction of capitalism through the nuclear family. Kids are the next generation of proletarian workers. They observe and internalize capitalist norms of their parents. Very, very good. Social reproduction theory is the nuclear family produces and protects capitalism. That's correct, Stevie. Well done. Social systems reproduce unless they are disrupted. In this case, they want to disrupt the family to solve social reproduction problems and end capitalism. You guys are doing so great. The reproduction of the system of capitalism by the reproduction of the nuclear family, which teaches children to partake in capitalism. Excellent. A system like capitalism tends to reproduce itself. They want to break the cycle to destroy the system itself. Capitalism reproduces the institutions. Lots of great answers in the chat. I'm sorry if I didn't get to yours. Thank you for the super chat. Penance for missing the stream. Thank you, everyone. Listen, guys. Big Tech apparently made like $500 off of like lying about me on the internet. So, you know, if you really want to get revenge on Big Tech, there would be nothing that would piss him off more than if I made a lot of super chats tonight just talking about socialism, because he thinks that this is all really boring and stupid. And he thinks that, you know, we're wasting our time watching all of this. And I just think, you know, if you have the means to do it, it might send a nice little FU to that guy. I'm just saying. Anyway, so people understand generally that socialists want to they want to control the means of production. What people don't understand is that they consider the nuclear family to be the means of production of capitalism. So when socialists are talking about controlling the means of production, it's not just about like the products that are produced or the factories or anything like that. It's the people. The people are the means of production. The nuclear family is the means of production of the social system of capitalism that they are actively trying to abolish. Does everyone understand that? Please let me know if you have questions in the chat.
Rather than depending so much on atomized and free labor in private nuclear households. What it is not, since you also asked me, you know, what it's not about separating people. It's not about a top-down, sort of deletion of infrastructure in one stroke. It's certainly not about somehow, you know, failing to appreciate the immense amount of, life-giving work that the family does in the world for many, many people today, right? But the family in many contexts for marginalized and racialized and undocumented communities is often the only sort of fence against the racial terror of the state. It's a sort of infrastructure that helps protect people, you know, against much worse realities, including the kind of depredations of the labor market and so on. And I just want to be really clear that it's not about, like, family abolition is not about saying, you know, that everything the family does is somehow bad. Like, you know, and there's also a recognition, I think, that has...
Hang on. Gabrielle says, and this is a fair question, I don't get how any of this can be accomplished without top-down authoritarian control. They're already doing it. When you see policies in the K through 12 public schools that are saying that schools don't have to inform parents if their kids are going to the schools and using different names and pronouns, that is an attack on the nuclear family. When you have social emotional learning in schools that is socially transitioning students to believe they're genderqueer, gender fluid, to try to abolish the gender binary, to convince kids that they are not man or woman, that is an attack on the nuclear family. All of gender ideology is really built around an attack on the nuclear family. The goal of gender ideology is not to trans the kids, is not to sexualize the kids. The goal of gender ideology is to abolish the gender binary. The reason they want to abolish the gender binary is that they believe that capitalism created the gender binary, which put men in the workplace where they had all the power and all the money. It put women in the home doing the unpaid labor of raising the nuclear family. The nuclear family does not exist if the gender binary gets abolished. So how they're doing this is not that there's going to be any sort of like person on the like a big brother type figure saying there will be no more nuclear family. No, they're using gender ideology and the public schools to break down all of the societal norms specifically around gender, because if they do that, that is going to inadvertently destroy the nuclear biological family. They're trying to queer the nuclear family. Almost every time you hear about a family of choice from a far leftist perspective, that is an attempt to queer the nuclear family. Queer means going against what is ever the normal, the legitimate, the dominant. It is a direct attack on capitalism. So they're already doing this. They're doing it through laws that are being passed that you usually don't know about, usually at the local and state level. They're doing it through indoctrination in the K through 12 public schools. They're doing it through pop culture. They're doing it through clothing choices even. Like I remember last year at Target during Pride Month, I literally saw they had like a bag or something that said family of choice. And I was like, no one's talking about that. Everyone's talking about the rainbow stuff. What about the direct attack on the nuclear family that Target literally had on a piece of merchandise? This is how the left works. They do everything quietly. They do everything in a way that you don't even know what they're doing until they're already doing it. I mean, we could even look at Somerville, Massachusetts. Somerville, Massachusetts has literally passed laws protecting polyamorous couples because polyamory is one of the ways that they're going to destroy the nuclear family. So you're going to start seeing more of that. You're going to start seeing more and more articles come up about polyamory, more discussion about polyamory. Polyamory is basically like being in a relationship with more than one person and all that stuff. But there are actually laws on the books in Somerville, Massachusetts that protect you from discrimination if you're in a polyamorous relationship. Make sense? Why is my computer doing an update right now? Why? Go away.
Always been present.
Oh, hang on. Did I miss a super chat? Hang on. I missed a super chat. Apologize, Johnny. To what extent do you consider the radical leftists to have a voice in mainstream politics? Much more than you might think. I can think only a few politicians, but they're constantly laughed at and ridiculed by their own side. Okay, here's the thing. The radical revolutionary far left does not believe they are going to elicit the change they want to see in the world through politics. The radical revolutionary far left owns the public schools. They own the colleges and universities. They own any entertainment in Hollywood. They own the media. There are many more of these people than you think there are. They are everywhere. And so it doesn't actually matter how many political positions they get elected to, because that's not how they're trying to change things. They change things through institutional power, which means that, so there's a difference between institutional and political power. And I wrote about this at one time on my Substack. Like political power is you get elected to a political position. You have that position for a year, 2 years, 4 years, 6 years, depending on the term of the position, whatever. Institutional power means you get put in a job that is very hard to get fired from. And so that is actually a much more powerful form of influence, because in a political position, you can get voted out of that political position. When you have institutional power, like they do in the universities, they do in the K through 12 public schools and Hollywood and media and all the things, they're in those positions as long as they want to be in those positions for the most part. And so that is how they're making change. Now, if they can get elected, someone elected to a political position here and there, they'll do it. But even their political parties, even the Revolutionary Communists of America flat out said, yeah, we're creating a political party, but it's not necessarily because we want to run for public office. We just want to give something for people to join so that we can use it to organize to do other things. So you have to know how the left thinks about this stuff. They don't think in terms of short-term political wins. They'll take them if they can get them, but that's not where they put the most of their energy. I hope that makes sense.
Politics. That if emancipatory and liberatory social justice forces don't prevail and don't win, that, you know, it's possible that something worse than the family does exist, you know. And that doesn't really bear thinking about. But the other, you know, the fact is also that the family is already a crisis. It is part of the crisis of capitalism, the social reproduction crisis, as Marxist feminists would call it. Social reproduction being the sort of ensemble of activities that remake a human person every day, so that that person can go back to work and sell more labor to the capitalist class to generate value. Social reproduction also, reproduces people who don't work, on the labor market. So from the point of view of the bosses and the capitalists, that's kind of a waste, right? Like, so there's a lot of kind of elements of what happens in the family that is not directly kind of serving the system, and that's why I think we kind of partly rightly experience the family as a zone away from the logics of the economy, and from the sort of, discipline of the state, and that's not, like I say, there is a tiny.
Hang on, we got a question in the chat from Jeremiah. Do those advocating for this explain how capitalism created all they see is wrong, or is it? Well, yeah, okay, so yes, they do explain it. Now, I'm going to explain to you what they think. I'm not saying I agree with this. I'm just explaining to you what they think. They believe capitalism was created by farmers because prior to farmers existing, the land was still collectively owned by the indigenous people, and then farmers came along and farmers privatized the land, and that was the start of capitalism. Remember, thank you, Judy, I appreciate it. Remember, so when socialists say capitalism, what they mean is private property ownership, and that alone. And other people have different definitions of capitalism, and that's fine, but they mean private property ownership. Your ability to own a home, your ability to own land, your ability to own an apartment rental, your ability to own intellectual property, your ability to run a private business, even a small one. They sometimes say you can still have your private business, but you can't. They call it petit bourgeois. Private property also means your parental rights, which are a form of private property under their ideology. And it also means your individual liberties, your freedom of speech, your freedom of religion, things like that. So all of those things, they believe, uphold capitalism, and they want all of those things destroyed. The reason that they believe that capitalism created all the problems in the world is because capitalism creates inequities. What that means is some people are going to have more private property than others. Some people are going to have more money than others. Some people are going to have better homes than others. Some people are going to have better cars than others, and, better businesses than others. Some people aren't even going to have businesses at all. And so what this leads to is an uneven distribution of resources in which capitalism promotes profit over human need and care and all those things. And so they believe that this uneven distribution of resources and the need to generate as much profit as possible to feed the bourgeois, that is what is creating all of the problems in the world. That's what's creating the problems with people receiving healthcare. That's what's creating energy problems. That's what's creating social justice problems. That's what's creating all the problems related to race. That's everything. So that's what they believe, and they believe that if we just get rid of capitalism, again, private property ownership, that will get rid of the vast majority of problems. Hope that makes sense. Let me know.
Any bit of truth to that, right? We feel attached to this zone because we think of it as a sort of sanctuary and a sort of haven. Unfortunately, it's not actually a pure haven or a pure refuge at all. And it props up very much these systems that ultimately wear us down, force us into lifetimes of backbreaking work, which recently with the Great Resignation and the Big Quit, we saw people kind of reaching a breaking point in relation to. And I thought it was interesting that the crises about sort of pods and quarantines and the sort of rejection of work came together in our recent history, because I think of work and the family as, completely inseparable, and we can get into that later. And I should stop talking really, but I just wanted to emphasize that it's certainly not about saying, families suck and, we just want to kind of get rid of them. We can get into what abolition actually means, right? But it's certainly not about separating or diminishing the amount of care that we receive in the world. On the contrary, it's about recognizing that if you love the people in your family, you probably agree that they deserve a lot more than the organized scarcity that is the private nuclear household that currently arranges the care that we get.
So a lot of people think that people who want to abolish the nuclear family, they don't have kids and they don't have good relationships with their parents and stuff like that, and that's why they want to abolish the family. First of all, that's not true. Now, Sophie herself, I don't believe has kids, but we do watch other abolish the family activists like Emmy O'Brien, who is Sophie's best friend. Emmy O'Brien has a kid. And so, like, this idea that socialists are not having kids is not true. Socialists not only have kids, they have organized childcare programs in order to indoctrinate their kids into socialism that exists at all their meetings and stuff like that. But what Sophie just said is that, look, when we abolish the nuclear family, it's not as though, we're going to kick grandma out of the house or something. You can still like grandma. You can still love grandma. You can still do all those things. We're just giving grandma access to better forms of care. We're just making sure grandma has access to better health care and better resources and better this and better that, because grandma will no longer be confined to the resources of the nuclear family. That's because they believe that when they get rid of the nuclear family, that's one of the things that will lead to getting rid of capitalism. That will lead in a glorious era of universal healthcare in which everyone will have access to all the healthcare they need free of charge from the government. Hey, Carlin. Hi, Tom. Is there a country today that closely models the society they desire? I don't think so. They generally seem like something different from the USSR because of family values and gender focus. Yeah. So Sophie's not a Bolshevik. Sophie's a queer Marxist. So Bolsheviks who would want something more akin to like the Russian Revolution, they're not going to like queer Marxists and Bolsheviks don't get along. Because Bolsheviks are really more focused on economic stuff, whereas queer Marxists are focused on destabilizing all of our society. If I had to choose between the two, queer Marxists like Sophie are significantly more dangerous than Bolsheviks like the Revolutionary Communists of America. It's not to say they're not both problems, but one is definitely more dangerous than the other. What they would tell you, I believe, is that there is not currently a society that resembles what they want because, wait for it, real socialism has never been tried. It has to be tried in an industrialized country like the United States in order to be successful. That's what they think. That's not what I think. Appreciate the question, though.
Great. Thank you so much. I think I'm going to jump a little bit ahead in my questioning since you brought up work and care. And I think that this is one of the many sort of important parts or many important things that this book, but also the sort of like, sort of movement or sort of beginning of a philosophical re-embracing of family abolition can kind of talk about. But, what you trace the sort of family abolition through lots of liberatory movements, not movies, sorry. Black Power, gay liberation, through the feminist movements and sort of various iterations. But one of the things I think is interesting is that you sort of point to basically 1985 to 2015 as this kind of desert of family abolitionism. Like it kind of slips off of a lot of radical to-do lists, if those to-do lists still exist, or sort of these, don't think in 2015 we really heard that many sort of feminists talk about family abolition. I think it's sort of becoming more, again, more popularized. But what's sort of your, again, this is inviting you to sort of sum up parts of your books, which I don't want you to have to do too much, but what is your sort of read of like why and how family abolition or even marriage abolition or children's liberation, which is another question I have, how some of these sort of family oriented demands did stop feeling pressing or necessary? And is it just because some of those movements waned or changed? It seems like it did happen kind of within a small amount of time.
Yes. Great question. I mean, it's a question I ongoingly feel curious about, and I don't believe I have the sort of complete answer. But another brief comment just before I answer is though that I have been challenged a little bit on my sort of statement.
Actually, it's funny. It's funny that you say this because socialists usually, like Sophie is actually unique among socialists in that Sophie actually, she wears lipstick. She does, like, Sophie presents relatively well. Most socialists, especially the queer Marxists, they wear no makeup at all. So Sophie is actually wearing more makeup than most of them do. Sophie is also unique in that she wears colors. If you go to socialist events, and I've gone undercover at like several of them now, there's no color except for red. It's all drab. It's like khaki and green and black and gray. And then they might have like a red hat or like a red scarf or something like that. But there's no blues. There's no like bright emerald colors. There's no purples. There's nothing like that. It's just all drab. It's actually kind of freaky to be in there. So Sophie is a well-dressed socialist. Sophie is the flashy queen of the socialists. True. Yeah, actually, it's funny. I started wearing better makeup since we started watching Socialism. Actually, like when we first started watching Socialism, I made it a point to like not wear makeup on Socialism Saturdays because I was really just going for it. I'm like, we're gonna do socialism. I'm gonna act socialist, and then I was like, nah, F this.
It's a complete sort of lull in family abolitionist imagination in between, the mid 80s and more or less 2015. I think it is a bit of an overstatement on my part that that light completely went out. And some radicals, who were really active around the sort of so-called alter globalization movements of the late 90s and early 2000s were sort of asking me why I didn't include some of the radical sort of infrastructures of mutual aid and, cohabitation and squatting and so on in my history, which is actually a really good point. I don't think the history of family abolition is ever really entirely kind of, a flat line, in it. I might need to change my potted history just to say this is a tiny pamphlet and a very much more in-depth book by my my comrade and friend M.E. O'Brien is actually
M.E. O'Brien
next year from Pluto Press. So we're all a little, we're collaborating here in the 21st century to flesh out this history in greater depth. But yeah, basically what happened at the end of the red decade I mentioned, and I've been revisiting this history by looking at the historian Alice Eccles's sort of account of 1967 to 1975 and what happened to the women's liberation ecology, which is a parallel history to histories you can read of what happened to gay liberation and what happened to Black power. And, more or less, the story is, the liberatory and critically utopianist movements were stomped into the dust. It's simple as that. On one level, I cannot insist enough that, those of us who feel that we are, in a sense, the transgenerational, comrades or allies of those new left revolutionaries have to metabolize still today, no matter what age we are, the grief of that, right? The sheer kind of multiplicity of psychological sort of cope that we tend to fall into when we're not capable collectively of simply facing the fact that we lost. It's very sort of common to look inward, what was done wrong, what were the mistakes. It's not that that's entirely not useful, it is probably useful to think about what alliances were missing, what connections were missed, but I do think there's a tendency to turn away from some of the aspirations of that moment where everything seemed possible, on the basis that it was wrong to have tried, because it didn't work out. And Ellen Willis, as I talk about in Abolish the Family, describes the turning away from horizons like family abolition and children's liberation at the very end of the 70s, sort of writing in the Village Voice. Ellen Willis is describing, how people that 5 years prior were all down, for really transforming society completely, and necessarily that would include, the social factory of the home, not just the kind of public sphere and the formal workplace of the factory. But however, during the course of the 70s, like the sense that was even sayable, thinkable, just kind of like disappeared. And I've noticed myself in the archive that, in the early 70s, you have these texts from Black radicals in Oakland saying, so Pat Parker, for instance, was a sort of anti-imperialist feminist nurse who says at a meeting, a convergence, that basically white women need to get with it and be brave in saying abolish the family.
Well, Vince James can cry all the tears he wants, Juice, and I really don't care. And if he shared that clip, then it's an older clip, and I think everyone knows it's an older clip. And you know what? That's just the way it goes. Nick is well aware that I used to call him gay. I have since retracted, I've since disavowed, and Vince James can have all the feelings he wants about that, but like, why is Vince James trying to cause problems where there ain't no problem? Would be my question. Why is he trying to cause problems where there ain't no problems? Sometimes there's times when people dislike each other, and then they come back and they realize they were really best friends all along. And they really should just put aside any nonsense that, like, Nick used to insult me too. And, that's all I can do. I literally wish Nick well on finding his virgin Catholic Italian hot wife just this past week on my show. We psychicked, if we did tarot cards. Now, Nick, of course, does not endorse tarot cards. I'm not putting this on Nick. He's Catholic. He's a good boy. But I had a whole question where we asked, is Nick ever going to find his perfect Italian virgin Catholic, like beautiful wife, young wife? And we said, yes, we think he's going to do it. So congrats, Nick. If people want to bring up stuff from years ago just to cause problems where there ain't no problem, I guess I just don't know what to say.
And so it's kind of like my impression that, which I think is shared by many, that the only feminists talking about, family abolition are, well, actually just one, the sort of famous, infamous New York Jewish revolutionary Shulamith Firestone. At least that, when I say I thought, that was my impression, I would say 10 years ago. I think it's a common one, that there's this kind of black sheep almost of the movement who said these sort of unreasonable things about the family. In fact, when you really go and look through the written record of the movements, Firestone actually seems quite, timid almost in comparison with the united front of certain kinds of anti-imperialist revolutionary black groups who are saying that the family obviously has to be overthrown if capitalism and the state are going to be defeated.
Hello.
But then at the end of the 70s.
Hello. The family obviously has to be overthrown if capitalism and the state are going to be defeated. Let's listen to that again.
The written record of the movements. Firestone actually seems quite, timid almost in comparison with the united front of certain kinds of anti-imperialist revolutionary black groups who are saying that the family obviously has to be overthrown if capitalism and the state are going to be defeated. But then at the end of the 70s and by the mid 80s, in 1984, we have this other very famous text, which is also extremely strong and powerful and reasoned for its moment. And that is Hazel Carby's letter, sort of White Woman Listen, in which she's saying that white women are overemphasizing the oppressive character of the family. And that while Black women would not deny that the family has a sort of structurally oppressive function in society, what needs to happen right now, i.e. in the context of triumphing neoliberalism, you know, and accelerating sort of austerity and terrorization of Black life and Black households is frankly to, you know, to acknowledge the role that family has played in the history of Black resistance against the state, right?
Hey,
and those
Yasmin, please ask him like why he made it so easy for me to bait him into that conversation that resulted in the DMs that I posted publicly. Like why was it so easy to bait him into that, to get him to say the quiet part out loud? Because I mean, I was told by him that I'm very dumb and very stupid, and he's just so much smarter than me. And so I wonder why it was so like, did big tech, and I'm sorry, I said we weren't going to talk about this, but you know, whatever. It's my stream. I'll do what I want. It is actually a productive stream tonight for Abolish the Family. Actually, we're getting some great stuff for Abolish the Family. So I think people can give me just a moment. Like if big tech had ever actually engaged with my content and had seen that we talk about game theory like all the time, if big tech had actually, you know, like if he had ever been a fly on the wall of one of my community calls, he would have actually heard me talking about him and some of the things that he said to me. Actually, can I just get the chat to confirm this? Did it for people who were in my community calls, did I tell you not too long ago that big tech was doing this weird thing where he was trying to make me into his submissive woman? Like this is something I talked about privately because we were gaming out. What is he actually doing? What is the actual thing here? What does he actually want? Do you guys remember that? Yeah. Nick was there for that call. Bot was there for that call. Jenny was there for that call. We had an entire discussion about this. When he thought I was just so in love with him, and I was just like, no, I had already figured out that bitch was manipulating me like this weeks and weeks and weeks ago. Yes, we had a whole discussion about this. And so maybe someone can ask him about that. Maybe someone can ask him about that. Why was he so dumb to allow me to bait him into that DM back and forth? All right, we're not talking about him anymore. Let's move on.
Those two moments are so fascinating because, as I say, it's not about saying, you know, one of them is kind of more right than the
Hang on, Hannah's asking a great, and Hannah's new to this, so everyone, like, let's send extra love to Hannah right now, because I know that especially for people watching Abolish the Family for the first time, again, I warned you guys, this is the most dystopian stuff on the internet. It might seem dry, but this is crazy. So the main point, from what I understand, is to replace capitalism by destroying the family unit and replacing it with socialist structure for not equality, for equity. Socialists don't want equality, they want equity. Every time you guys hear equity, that means Marxism. Every time you hear an equity department in school districts, that means they're integrating Marxism into the school district. So yes, they want to destroy the nuclear family because they believe that the nuclear family is the literal means of reproduction of capitalism, which again is private property ownership, and they can't get to their primary goal, which is abolishing capitalism, unless they go through the nuclear family. So guys, there are two things that need to be protected at all costs. And if we protect these two things at all costs, we win and they lose. Number one, the gender binary. The gender binary, another name for that is the patriarchy. Not patriarchy as in men domineering women groypers. Okay, I know how you define patriarchy, but how they define patriarchy is there are men and there are women and there are no other genders but men or women. And those two genders are a real thing. They want to get rid of the gender binary entirely. So they want to get rid of the idea entirely that there are men and women. They want to create a world of infinite gender, where everyone is a they, them, or a ze, zer, or a zim, zay, or a fey, fair, or any number of other pronouns. So that is thing number one that we need to protect: the gender binary. There are men and there are women, and that's it. And there are two genders, and it is binary, and that's just the way it goes. That's not to say, by the way, that means we need to get rid of trans people, because trans people, when they're transitioning from men to woman, or woman to man, they're still upholding the gender binary, because they're still saying there are two genders and I just want to live as one and not the other. Now, you might not like that. That's fine. I'm not arguing with this at this point, but like, I'm just saying that like trans people inherently don't abolish the gender binary if they're transitioning from men to woman or woman to man. So gender binary is the number one thing we need to protect. The second thing that we need to protect is the nuclear family structure, because if the nuclear family structure falls, they win. That's what they're trying to get at with the gender binary attacks, is the nuclear family, because you can't have the nuclear family without the gender binary. But if they manage to dissolve parental rights, we are effed. We are so effed. We are unbelievably effed. We cannot recover from that. And they're already winning on that front. So as long as we protect the gender binary and the nuclear family, we win and they lose. Everything else, so far as I'm concerned, has to become secondary to that. And I know that people have other issues that they care about, and that's all fine, well, and good. I'm not saying you can't walk and chew gum at the same time. I'm saying that a very big priority should be placed on protecting the gender binary and the nuclear family. You do not give the left 1 inch in that regard.
It's about recognizing that something materially, gargantuan happened. That the terrain of political possibility completely changed. So yeah, and the same can be said. I would briefly just say, Anita Bryant spelled the defeat of the gay liberation horizon. So I mean, not her personally in and of herself, but this sort of the isolation of gay liberationists in the context of the wider revolutionary left, which is also, I think, maybe a valid criticism.
Hang on.
And, but given
this isn't the own you guys think it is. I know you think you're owning the libs with this. It's not the own you think it is, because guess what? They're trying to socially destroy the idea of gender. If they are selling shirts that say there's more than two genders, it doesn't matter that those shirts come in men and women. It matters that people are wearing those shirts in public, articulating that message publicly. It matters that people are buying into that message. It matters because those shirts wouldn't even be produced if people weren't buying them in the first place to say, yes, this is what I believe. So I know you think you're owning the libs right now and you're getting one over on them. The existence of this shirt and the sale of this shirt, and it doesn't matter if there are men's and women's genders, is proof that they are winning. This is what I mean when I say we need to focus on things that matter.
That this is one of the times where it is important to recognize there was a failure of solidarity from the wider left when the organized forces that wanted to re-privatize care, if you like, even more deeply in the context of a neoliberal revolution, that they started saying, and indeed we should think about this today, given what is happening with trans children and their bodily autonomy today. They started saying, gay people are groomers and pedophiles, and they and they destroy the basis of American capitalist life.
Hang on. My dog is piping in from downstairs. Jeremiah asks, is the social popular acceptance of the agenda a form of indoctrination or social conditioning? Well, I mean, now my dog is really upset about this. She's a Chihuahua. Please excuse her. I mean, we're at the point now where kids are starting to learn this in public schools at 5 years old. So I'm going to say basically every student in public schools is learning the things that she's saying right now. So it's a form of indoctrination, social conditioning, whatever you want to call it. But yeah, I mean, they took over. Yeah, my dog is really upset about this. Yep, true. They solidified their grip on the public schools around 2008, 2009, 2010. That's not to say they weren't in the public schools before that, but that's really when their grip on the public school system became basically insurmountable. That's when equity departments started popping up all over the country. That's when they started doing equity reports. That's when they started integrating equity into the curriculum. And this was back before people understood what this meant. So we are now in a position, the reason I want people to understand that this all started to come together around 2008, 2009, 2010. That's when the long march through the institutions was complete. What that means is the graduating high school and college students today have spent their entire school careers in this system. They have never known a school system in the K through 12 public schools or in higher education that wasn't teaching them this ideology. This is all they know. They utilize the public schools and the colleges to indoctrinate an entire generation of students into a cult. And most of those students, the college protesters that you're seeing today, people you're seeing leading the protests all over the country, they don't know anything differently. And it's not like they've stopped. They've only sped up and gotten more. Does that make sense to everyone? And my dog has stopped barking, so apparently yes.
Third thing is perhaps something that could have been leaned into. The fear that comes with the suggestion of sort of sexual threat to children, the weaponization of the sexual innocence of the child, is something that back then in the early 80s and still today, we do not have a brave, united kind of left response to, right? So when someone gets called a groomer in this weaponized, organized way, the template for which was laid by Anita Bryant in the 80s and the sort of Reaganite campaign of organized homophobia, and sort of, Christian evangelical capitalism on steroids, we lose an enormous amount of movement memory about where the location of sexual violence actually is in the world, right? And in the fabric of capitalist social reproduction.
Capitalist
where
social
the threat
reproduction
to children actually is the private patriarchal nuclear household.
The threat to children is not with grooming in schools. I need to clip this. The threat to children is in the private patriarchal nuclear household. Everyone hear that? Let's back up. I'm going to get a clip of this. Please bear with me for a second. I don't think I've clipped this one before. Let me go back to where she starts talking about groomers. By the way, Sophie is not in favor of sexualizing kids. I've actually heard her speak on this. She's not in favor of sexualizing kids at all in any way. And so I want to make sure I want to make sure that that's clear, that she doesn't advocate for that. In fact, she actively advocates for the opposite. Let me just configure my recording real quick. Yeah, but we watched this before. We watched this one a long time ago. All right, let me get a clip of this. Appreciate you guys bearing with me, but we're going to be able to listen to it again. Yup, another way of saying adult supremacy. You're right. Come on, clipping tool. Yes, working. Winning.
The fear that comes with the suggestion of sort of, sexual threat to children, the weaponization of the sexual innocence of the child, is something that back then in the early 80s and still today, we do not have a brave, united kind of left response to, right? So when someone gets called a groomer in this weaponized, organized way, the template for which was laid by Anita Bryant in the 80s and the sort of Reaganite campaign of organized homophobia, and sort of, Christian evangelical capitalism on steroids, we lose an enormous amount of movement memory about where the location of sexual violence actually is in the world, right? And in the fabric of capitalist social reproduction. where the threat to children actually is the private patriarchal nuclear household, right? And when we sort of capitulate to the sorts of moves that make a kind of threat and a social terror out of the figure of the queer person, we throw out this enormous and indispensable component of utopian wisdom, and we kind of refragment ourselves, which is why, as I guess I was trying to say earlier,
that's enough for that clip. How does everyone feel about that? The real danger to the child. Hang on, let me just make sure this is saved real quick. Create new document. There we go. Exactly. The real danger to the child is the private capitalist patriarchal nuclear family. The real location of so what she's saying is that that basically most sexual violence against children takes place in the nuclear family. And so if the nuclear family didn't exist, then child sexual abuse wouldn't exist, is what the argument is. Let's see. Tom says, as someone who found your channel a month ago, I'm wondering how you differentiate the leftist communist content that could have an effect on broader society versus nothing we watch for socialist content, Tom, is 3 idiots on a live stream. Absolutely nothing we watch is 3 idiots on a live stream. We watch the most prominent far left socialist activists in the country today. So it might sometimes come across as though we're watching 3 idiots on a live stream, but those 3 idiots are presenting at conferences all over the country, are writing books about their ideas, are some of the most celebrated activists in the space today. So I carefully curate the content that we watch so that we are not just watching 3 idiots on a live stream. We don't watch fucking BreadTube, bro. We're not watching Vosh. We're not watching VTubers. We're not watching any of that shit. We're watching actual real world socialist activists, people who actively identify as revolutionary socialist organizers, people who are working in the universities, working in the K-12 schools, publishing the books, speaking at all their events. The vast majority of videos that we watch on this channel are directly related to socialist publishing, because one of the ways socialists make their money is through book publishing. So you don't have to, that's part of what I'm doing here, man. I'm providing you a service where I'm curating out all the bullshit and giving you the real stuff. Jeffrey says, I love how you cut through the waste and make sense of this. I don't have a lot of time to be here as often as I'd like, but every time I'm here, I learn valuable, important lessons. Thank you, Jeffrey. I appreciate you. Look at Jeffrey's beard. Isn't that fabulous? Let's see. Thank you, Jeffrey. All right, I just want to go back and listen to this one more time. I apologize, but I feel like this is an important thing.
We lose an enormous amount of movement memory about where the location of sexual violence actually is in the world, right? And in the fabric of capitalist social reproduction. Where the threat to children actually is the private patriarchal nuclear household, right? And when we sort of capitulate.
The reason she called it the patriarchal nuclear household is directly back to what I explained earlier, which they believe that capitalism, private property ownership, created the gender binary, men and women. The gender binary is also called the patriarchy. The patriarchy puts men in the workplace where they make all the money and have the power. It puts women in the home where they do the unpaid labor of raising and birthing the next generation of proletarian workers. That's why she's calling it the patriarchal nuclear family. Does everyone understand that?
To the sorts of moves that make a kind of threat and a social terror out of the figure of the queer person, we throw out this enormous and indispensable component of utopian wisdom, and we kind of refragment ourselves, which is why, as I guess I was trying to say earlier, the history is quite fragmented, right? When I do my potted history, one of the tragic things about it is that the different sort of instances of family abolitionist imaginary do not have as many kind of links between them as I would like to be able to say they do.
Okay, great. We're getting in some great questions that we will get to at the end, which also some of them are entangled with some of the questions I have. So I'm going to skip to one that's maybe not, has not come up among questions from the audience. Just as a reminder, you can put in your questions whenever, and we will, in about 15 minutes, we'll start answering them, if not a little bit earlier. But I wanted to talk a little bit about how your work, not just in this book, but I think more broadly has taken up with the idea of mothering against motherhood, which
mothering against motherhood
from Adrienne Rich. And the idea is that the practice of care could be degendered and an action, not a fixed identity. This is how I understand it, at least. And as the action, it could be potentially shared by all. Is there any similar recuperation of fathering in the idea of family abolition, and why or why
not? So in a word, no. And, this is basically one of the sort of revolutionary feminists.
Hang on. How do they come up with word salad phrases? So what you guys can understand is this is not word salad to them. When I say that socialists speak a separate language, what I mean is socialists speak a separate language. It might sound like English, but it is not English. This is why my like flagship presentation and the book that I'm working on, at least right now, is called How to Speak Socialist. Because socialist is its own distinct language. It exists, like it started mostly in academia, and then it's kind of like trickled down from there. But you got to understand that most of the people who are pushing these ideas in our society started in academia. This is a language that they understand. This is a language that they speak to each other in private. This is a language that they are fluent in this language. And one of the reasons we watch so many of these presentations is because we want to be fluent in this language as well. So it's like an immersive language course where it's like, if you want to learn French, the very best thing you can do is pick yourself up, go move to France for 6 months. You might not speak a lick of French when you enter France, but you will speak French when you leave, because language immersion is one of the best ways to learn a language. So this is why we spend so much time breaking down the words, breaking down the terminology, because they understand everything they're saying. It's that normies who have not been in this environment don't understand what they're saying, and they call it word salad. Socialists are completely consistent when you understand their language. Like, the right doesn't understand this. They see things like Queers for Palestine, and they're like, what the fuck does that even mean? Queer people would be thrown off a roof in Palestine. That makes no sense. They're completely inconsistent. No, they're not. No, they're not. Queers for Palestine means both queers and Palestinians are oppressed under the oppressive force of capitalism, and no one is free until everyone is free. And so they are in solidarity with the oppressed people of the world. That's what Queers for Palestine means. And so this is the purpose of this. And I promise you, if you guys stick around and you come back, you're going to become fluent in this language. And part of the benefit of that, or rather perhaps a curse, is that once you become fluent in this language, you start to hear it everywhere. And that's when the real fun begins. And that's when you really start realizing how pervasive these ideas are.
Commitments in my project, really, which is not
nope.
Nope.
It only seems highly interpretive to you because you don't know how to speak their language. There are people in my chat who know how to speak this language. Okay, so for people who've been watching Socialism with me for 6 months, a year, 2 years, is Jeremiah right that this is all highly interpretive, or are socialists incredibly consistent when you learn how to speak their language? What do you think? Well, I'll just ask the chat. You don't have to take my word for it. My chat will tell you. Are socialists completely consistent, or are they just making stuff up and it's all highly interpretive? Yeah, Milo says, it happens for everyone. For the first few months, it sounds like word salad. Eventually, you understand it, and then suddenly you hear it everywhere in businesses, media, church, schools. It's actually a very specific language. They are very consistent. They have consistent words and definitions. They're consistent. Socialists are incredibly consistent. And this is across training programs, by the way. It's not like we watch the same socialists every week. We watch Sophie quite a bit because Sophie's entertaining and fun and we like her and she generally speaks in less flowery language than other people. But like across every socialist group, they're speaking the same language. They're very consistent. They have a consistent logic and worldview. It's just very different. They are consistent. If you're new here and you feel like you don't understand this and you feel like you're not getting it yet, every single person you're seeing right now saying that they're very consistent, every single one of us, including me, we were all there at one point, guys. We've all been through this. This is just the process of learning to speak the language. But once you do learn to speak it, you will learn they are incredibly consistent. It's like putting on shades and They Live, and suddenly you see through all the ads to the true meaning. They're 100%. I am 100% correct. Thank you, Daniel. So this is why, guys, we encourage new people to ask a lot of questions, because we know that it's sometimes difficult to catch up. So Jeremiah, what I'm going to recommend you do, if you want a real crash course, bro, what I'm going to recommend you do is this. Head over to my Substack, which is carlin.substack.com. And I want you to go to the section called How to Speak Socialist. And at the very top of this section, you're going to find a 4-hour on-demand class. It's in 2 different parts. And what this class is, and it's just video that you can watch on the website in your own time. What this class is it uses all the best clips I have from trainings, and it breaks this is your crash course. If you want to get up to speed very, very quickly, go. I know it's 4 hours long, but that's because we watch a boat ton of clips all right in a row, all from a variety of different training and a variety of different sources. So this will get you up to speed very, very quickly. It is a free resource that is only available on my Substack. And so you can access that. Please share it out with people. If you haven't watched it yet, I would encourage everyone to do so. I'll pop the link in the chat right now, just in case you haven't seen it before. Here you go. That's in the chat on YouTube. That's in the chat on Rumble. If you're on X, you can just go to my Substack and find it. But this is the very best resource to get started. All right. Let's go back to our presentation. And Yasmin, I am following what you're saying. I'm just not going to interrupt the stream for it, but I appreciate you.
To imply some sort of, association between mothering and female gender. In fact, I think the strategic, necessity, the way we get through is by insisting in a sort of spirit of feminism against cisness, to sort of borrow from Emma Heaney's collection, which is forthcoming and I'm very excited about, the category that, we must center as feminists is this kind of anti-productive labor. And I mean anti, not just sort of non-productive. I actually mean sort of, the valences of social reproduction that produce, comrades, not workers. That's kind of what I mean by anti-productive, like the care of one another, Sorry, this may be a little bit kind of overly abstract as a response. Let me just kind of reel it back. So when you ask me about whether I have a category of fathering to mirror the revolutionary horizon of mothering against motherhood, the answer is no, because not because of a sort of hetero-pessimist kind of dislike for men. That's not sort of on the contrary, because already all of the men who are involved in care are basically mothering, and the best dads in that sense are kind of already motherers. Motherer is the sort of word I have for the ungendered kind of affinity rather than identity.
Motherer does not have a gender, is what Sophie just says. Because Sophie, by the way, Sophie's non-binary or identifies as non-binary. She uses they, them pronouns. Even though she doesn't look like a they, them, she does use they, them pronouns. Mothering is non-gendered. What that means is whoever is doing the care work in the home is mothering. Does everyone understand that? So a father, a man, can be a motherer if they are doing the care work in the private nuclear household of taking care of the kids, making the kids lunch, doing laundry, stuff like that. Yeah, exactly. A motherer is anyone who provides care in the home.
You know, for a labor that sort of holds and nurtures and creates, you know. So when you think about fathering in everyday language, it's an act of authorship, you know, it's an act of intellectual property patenting, if you like. It's like, I mean, this sounds maybe, you know, overly critical, but it actually is how we think about progeny. It's how we think about heredity. It's how we think about, you know, biogenetic kinship. The you know, the gestational component is a labor. Well, if we think of it as a labor, I argue in my previous book that gestating.
Well, I mean, this is actually legit though. Sophie has posted some Sophie has posted some sexy pictures on her Instagram. I'm not judging. Sophie legitimately does look sexy in some of those pictures. Just saying. If I was into women, if I wasn't deathly afraid of eating pussy, yes, she has. Yes, she has. Yes, she has.
As a labor, you know, it's certainly recognized that post-gestational, you know, maternal care is a labor in our society. But the sort of fathering aspect is the instant where the sperm hits the egg and the identity is inscribed. That's what it means to father a child. It means to ejaculate and inscribe, you know, genetic futurity. So it's not, it's a moment of fantasized, as I said, sort of authorship, you know, licensing. And since my family abolitionism is very much about the buried history of children's liberation, which you already raised, the idea that children, whilst they have very special sort of entitlements and needs, are people, you know, and as such don't, you know, belong to anyone as possessions, and are certainly not, and this is also just scientific fact, the extensions of anybody or the sort of reproductions of anybody. In fact, you know, Marxist biologists are quite clear, Marxist feminist biologists are quite clear that, and I know you do eugenic science research yourself, Miranda, but you know, the reproduction of the self is
hang on. This is we sometimes ask the important questions on Socialism Saturday. Do I think I could give a better blowjob than Sophie? Well, Sophie is a queer polyamorous pansexual. So Sophie has a girlfriend or a they-them friend. And then Sophie, and I'm basing this entirely on Sophie's Instagram. I could be wrong about this. Sophie also has a male friend that she hangs around with quite frequently. So I do think that Sophie does know how to give a blowjob. Can I give a better blowjob than Sophie? I mean, well, Sophie's an Aries. Sophie was born like 2 days before me or something like that. So we're both fiery women. I give a pretty damn good blowjob if I'm really trying. Sometimes, you know, you half-ass it because you just, you know, not every day is the best day. But if I'm actually trying, I do give a pretty good blowjob. I think I probably could give a better blowjob because I do have more fire than Sophie does, even though she's a redhead. But I think Sophie probably gives a pretty. I think she probably does actually give a pretty good blowjob. I mean, socialists tend to be highly sexualized, and so maybe a little bit more adventurous than, the average person. Yup, redheads are supposed to be really good at sex, so Sophie has that in her corner. But you know what? Sometimes it isn't a competition. Sometimes both people can actually just give really good blowjobs and everyone can enjoy themselves and have a good time with it.
Is not something that actually happens in sexuate reproduction. It's a fantasy we have that, is very central to the functions of the family that have to do with the transmission of class, of racial stability and racial identity, the administrative coherence of populations for the state, and so on and so forth, So I'll just stop there, shall I? It's not about sort of disliking a particular gender of person. It's about recognizing that patriarchy is one of capitalism's primary functions, in the way.
Patriarchy is one of capitalism's primary functions. Okay, I got to get a clip of that. Sorry. Record. Patriarchy is one of capitalism's primary functions because remember, again, capitalism created the patriarchy, the gender binary, which created the nuclear family, which is what Sophie wants to abolish.
It's not about sort of disliking a particular gender of person. It's about recognizing that patriarchy is one of capitalism's primary functions, in the way that it kind of creates identities as part of the privatization of care.
Excellent. Great clip, Sophie. Thank you. I think I missed this one the first time we watched this video. This is why we rewatch content every once in a while, because sometimes when you learn more things, more clips stand out to you. Let's keep going.
Okay, great. I'm going to pick up on one thing you said. I'm going to just say I do anti-eugenics just to everyone thinks I do eugenics science. Not the, just a side note.
Nah, Yasmin, we're not going to do that right now.
Anti-eugenic theory on eugenics. I always feel the need to slide that in when talking. But I wanted to pick up your mention of children's liberation, because this is also one that, maybe.
Pop quiz for the chat. What do they mean when they say children's liberation? Remember, this is a presentation at the University of Pennsylvania. What do they mean when they say children's liberation? Ivy League school. What does children's liberation mean? Anyone? Bueller. I know there's a delay in the chat. Children's liberation says, freeing children from being the private property of their parents. Children's liberation means abolishing parental rights. It means liberation from the nuclear family. Children's liberation means ending parental rights by liberating kids from their capitalist families. Liberation from the family. Liberation from the oppressive force of capitalism, aka parents. I appreciate the updates, Jasmine. Liberate the children from the nuclear family. Children's liberation means children liberated from the oppressiveness of their family. Remember, guys, socialists believe that children are the property of their family as long as capitalism exists, as long as parental rights exist. They want to get rid of parental rights because that will liberate children from being the private property of their family. Okay, so Purple Pinkman wants to know, I'm pretty new here, possibly my first time commenting. Any chance you can explain your own ideology for newbies so I can understand a little better where you're coming from and hoping for? Okay, I'm an anarcho-capitalist. I believe in abolishing all government but retaining private property. I know that's not going to happen in my lifetime, but I would really, really like it to. So that's the frame I come from. What we are doing, if you are new to this, is we are watching the like furthest of the far left, the radical revolutionary socialists that control the K through 12 public schools, they control higher education, entertainment, media, all that stuff. The reason we do deep dives into the far left is because we don't like them. They want to abolish all private property, and we believe that understanding your enemy is the very best way to defeating them. So we watch the most dystopian content that exists on the internet. This is content you will not see anywhere else on the internet. I have to hunt all over the internet for this content, but once you know where to look for it, you can find it pretty easily. So that's what we're doing. We watch the socialist left in order to understand them and their ideology so that we can defeat them, because I'm on the complete opposite end of the spectrum from the socialist left. But I appreciate you asking. But by the way, I actually do have socialists who watch my content too. I actually know more about the far left ideology than many socialists do. And and we often get socialists on the channel that are watching the content along with us because I find content that no one else does. I deleted my wrong answer so Carlin doesn't roast me. I'm not in a roasting mood tonight. I'm actually in a pretty jovial mood tonight. Don't worry about it.
Shulamith Firestone was most famous for, putting in this sort of like feminist ideological discourse, but again, used to be sort of a bigger political demand that I think radicals were making in maybe the 60s and the 70s. And so it comes up frequently in your book, but it's not always named. It's definitely there in spirit. Is children's liberation something that's sufficient for getting at the kind of freedom that you think of, that you're aiming towards with something like family abolition, or is there something that it lacks, or just a different emphasis? How do you sort of see those two conceptual frameworks related?
Children's liberation is an under-theorized tradition, although there is a lot on it. It perhaps is quite fitting that it's somewhat under-theorized because, children do not tend to theorize as much as else, that perhaps that's not true. Perhaps it's about the mode in which their theorizing occurs. But no, I wouldn't say they're synonyms at all. I would say that the very vexed but crucial question of how children's autonomy can be nourished and supported and safeguarded at the same time as their care is ensured, is one of the central things that you need to be thinking about if you want to think about deprivatizing care, i.e., abolishing the family. But I don't think they're synonyms. I think the contempt with which some, on the left treat the phrase, adult supremacy, right, which comes from the anarchist tradition, where indeed
okay, Chris is asking a question, thinking he's owning the libs, but there is actually an answer to this. And I don't actually think Sophie falls into this category, but let's just play this game. Pop quiz for the chat. Why are communists so ugly? There is an answer for this. Why are communists so ugly? And we've already got one answer in the chat because Milo jumped the gun. Milo knew I was going to ask a pop quiz. Okay, fair enough. Well, we do actually have an answer. What they're doing, so socialist communists are queering their looks. Queering means to do whatever is non-normative, whatever goes against society's norms. And so if there are societal norms and beauty standards, they're going to go against that. I actually recently wrote an article about this for the Substack. Hang on. Let me show you. Where is it? Here it is. What socialist so there is actually like a socialist uniform, a socialist haircut, and socialist tattoos. I'll pop this article in the chat if you guys want to read it. So what they're doing is they're queering beauty standards. They're going against what society considers to be beautiful. They reject capitalist social norms. They're queering beauty to disrupt the norm because they queer their looks to go against the normal, the legitimate, and the dominant. Yes, like this is what I'm saying. Sophie doesn't really do this. Now, I have seen Sophie in other instances where she is doing this, but typically Sophie is actually a very pretty queer Marxist, and it's not usual, but that's one of the reasons we like Sophie. They're queering their looks because they're queer, meaning going against the normal, exactly to subvert normality, to subvert societal standards. They believe in queering beauty. And also, this is good for us because when you see people that look like this in the real world, or they just have the haircut, or you can see like oftentimes they'll have these crazy like black line tattoos all over their arms. You know you're talking to a socialist when you see people looking like this. They go against the normative, which includes beauty standards. They're queering society's norms. Excellent, guys. Excellent, excellent, excellent. They also do think kids are little adults. That is actually correct, Teresa. Well done. I feel like we're having like one of the most productive Socialism Saturdays in a while. See, eliminating big tech from my existence has actually like just refocused the content. Like the chat's not, no one in the chat is even uppity tonight. Like everyone's getting along. The questions are really good. I want to like tell everyone, keep bringing the questions. I feel like this is great. I'm not even angry anymore because I'm not dealing with a man-child in the background that's trying to manipulate me into doing something. This is great. Yeah, Chris, that article that I posted, I actually did a podcast recently. We figured this out thanks to Nick Incognito. There is a tattoo style called ignorant tattoos that is a specific queer tattooing style. There's a recent podcast about it on the Substack because Nick found a random article about it from the UK. We had been trying to figure out the bad trash tattoos because I have a lot of tattoos, obviously, but like my tattoos are much better than theirs. And I understand tattoo culture and all that, but there is actually a specific queer tattoo style called ignorant tattoos.
You know, excellent sort of mutual aid infrastructure and knowledge came from during the pandemic that kept people alive, and where many of the sort of youth liberation or youth autonomy frameworks are being sort of maintained and developed and experimented with, led by young people, today in social centers such as the now defunct Purple Thistle in Vancouver, Canada, the contempt with which those notions are treated sometimes as though it couldn't possibly be serious, to challenge the sorts of proprietarian hierarchy that exists between adults and children, depresses me somewhat. I think it's yet another legacy of the crushing.
Exactly.
Of,
I noticed that too.
The utopian imagination in the rise of Reaganism and Thatcherism. Yes, indeed, it used to be quite common, even in Marx's day, right, to talk about children as the poorest proletarians in the world, right? This remains very much the case, and we haven't talked enough yet about the deeply sort of interlinked sort of character of children's liberation.
Thank you, Kelly.
The abolition of whiteness, prison abolition of the police, and so on. But
Sophie just said everything. Sophie just said everything out loud. Children's abolition is intricately linked to whiteness, to abolishing the police. Pop quiz for the chat, and we'll listen to this again. How is children's liberation linked to whiteness and abolish the police? Sophie always delivers. This is why we love Sophie. Every time. How is children's liberation linked to whiteness and abolishing the police? Because those are three words that all mean capitalism. Whiteness means capitalism. Whiteness means capitalism. Does anyone here need me to explain why whiteness means capitalism? Whiteness does not mean a pasty white Irish girl like me. Whiteness means capitalism. Capitalism is reproduced through the children. Police are the managers of capitalism. No one is free until everyone is free. Whiteness means capitalism. The police are the managers of capitalism. Everything that Sophie just said means abolish capitalism. And if anyone needs me to explain that, I'm more than happy to. Just let me know in the chat. In the meantime, I'm going to set this up because I want to get this clip.
Interlinked sort of character of children's liberation and, you know, the abolition of whiteness, prison abolition, abolition of the police, and so on. But I will say, you know, the racism of the family norm in the United States is something that is forcefully institutionalized through Child Protective Services, right? CPS, right? Which is, as Dorothy Roberts, who is one of our, you know, leading lights at University of Pennsylvania, you know.
Okay, let me just grab this clip real quick, guys. I do have people to asking me to explain why whiteness means capitalism, and I'm happy to do that. And again, I want to thank everyone that's new here tonight, and I hope you do join us for future streams. I stream Monday through Friday at 5 p.m. We do social, and we do actually watch leftist trainings during the week. We watch lighter leftist trainings during the week, so you can come and join us for that. But we do Socialism Saturdays on Saturdays at 6 p.m. Please make sure you mount the like button or goon the like button or peg the like button or do something else to the like button if you have not already. Nick says, just got my first tattoo. Congratulations, Nick. And the best thing is my tattoo artist homeschools his kids, showed him your podcast about ignorant tattoos, and he was like, what the fuck? Awesome. Thank you, Nick. I appreciate it. I hope that tattoo, just take care. Don't itch that tattoo, Nick. Don't do it. You just got to pat the tattoo. You don't need to do anything fancy with the tattoo. Just watch it with, like, I'm sure your tattoo artist gave you like recommendations, but okay, so why does whiteness mean capitalism? Because the left believes that capitalism, which is again defined as private property ownership, created slavery in the United States. Slavery is the ownership of people as private property based on race. White people were the bourgeois. Black people were the oppressed property. And then what that means is that slavery created systemic racism. Systemic racism is the system that upholds racism. You might also hear them call this institutional racism. When the left is referring to whiteness, white supremacy, racism, anti-racism, any of those things, what they are referring to is systemic racism. Not the race part, but the system part. The system that upholds racism is capitalism. They believe that if they just get rid of capitalism, they will eliminate all racism. This is why they changed the dictionary definition of racism in 2020 to literally mean the system that upholds racism. You can go back and look that up. That actually did happen. So I hope that helps people understand that. Again, capitalism, private property ownership created slavery. The ownership of people as private property. Slavery created systemic or institutional racism. When they're saying whiteness, they are not referring to skin color. They're referring to the system that upholds racism. Carlin, do you have a video where you explain what anarcho-capitalism is? Literally, anarcho-capitalism just means abolition of the government while retaining private property. If you want to know more about that, contact a guy named Dennis Pratt. He's Dennis Pratt Free on Twitter, and he will be able to explain all of this to you, but this is not something I make content about, so I can't help you on that. There are also all sorts of books you can read about that. Like connect with your libertarians in your area or libertarians on Twitter, and they will be able to explain all of that. Yes, and this is why older dictionaries are important. I have a big ass dictionary that's like this thick from the 1940s. I'd like to get one a little bit older, but I highly recommend everyone buy a pre-civil rights era like print dictionary. Just go onto eBay and find them, and they're actually really cool too. It's kind of cool to go back and see the evolution of words, because digital dictionaries can be changed. Print dictionaries can't be changed. And we need to start collecting that stuff.
She identifies as a sort of family policing system, right? And as she has recently made,
oh, that's cool,
really
Nick. Thanks for telling me.
In an interview in Parapraxis magazine, a new magazine from, you know, the horizons of sort of, you know, nurturing children's freedom and autonomy, you know, in a world where that sort of freedom and autonomy is, you know, attacked not primarily, although sometimes also, by, you know, people close to children in Black communities. You know, the sanctity of parenthood is not respected by the state, right? This is why polemically some theorists and philosophers have suggested that the Black family is an oxymoron, because its perimeter is always permeable to the police, you know. But when children need to be protected from, you know, the state, and
hey, Yasmin,
you know, in that sense, their relationships to
Yasmin, are you still messing around in big text chat? Let me know.
Their loved ones need to be affirmed. That doesn't have to contradict the eventual horizon of abolition of the family in the sense of the privatization of care. And so you can transform, you know, the family while defending families against police brutality, right? And that's the kind of thing that needs to have children as political actors at its core, you know, because it's simultaneously true that the family, regardless of, you know, the racial, you know, character of that family, is the most dangerous place for, you know, for children in terms of the likelihood of
again, this is the second time in this presentation that Sophie has said the family is the most dangerous place for children. This is the crux of Sophie's argument, is that children are not safe in their own families. Now, you might think that that sounds crazy, but last year around this time, there was a whole symposium at the University of Connecticut Law School in which they were literally saying exactly the same thing. There was a symposium called "Are Parental Rights in the Best Interest of the Child?" There have been articles in major publications all over the country saying, are parental rights in the best interest of the child? Parental rights are dangerous for children. So again, people might think, like, and I've seen people asking in the chat, how many views does this video have? And is it really that widespread? This video only has a couple hundred views, but the ideas from this video are being preached in major publications all over the country. I've written about that on my Substack. It's being taught in law schools. There are entire conferences around these ideas. So it might seem as though this is just some kooky thing that's happening in some small little corner of the University of Pennsylvania. But we're not watching this if it's just a kooky thing that's off in a corner. We're watching this because these ideas go from the university and they permeate into public life.
Sexual abuse, you know, the family is where the overwhelming majority of child sexual abuse happens. It's where the overwhelming majority of rape happens on this planet. It's where, for women, one is most likely to be murdered. You know, the majority of women, according to at least one recent study, who are killed by an intimate partner, right? A domestic partner or family member, you know. And that used to be a kind of basic feminist point, you know, that children and women, and ideally, depending on which movement, because unfortunately these alliances weren't made, but gay and queer people and gender non-conforming and trans people together are the constituency that need to struggle as a class.
Hang on. You guys are asking some great questions. Jeremiah says, still thinking about socialism as a language. is the goal to talk it back to socialists in their language, or just to know? Well, so the real goal of learning how to speak socialist, and again, people in the chat can back me up on this, once you become fluent in their language, you literally see it everywhere. And it's like you're able to identify words that you just didn't think about before, and you start to be able to go socialist, socialist, socialist. And it's especially like pronounced if you go into your kid's school and the teacher all of a sudden starts speaking this language to you because they learned it in college too, or you're watching a TV show and they're just like sliding it in there ever so subtly, and you're like, aha, I know what you're talking about now. You start to recognize things in a different way when it shows up in the real world. And when we can recognize things in a different way when it shows up in the real world, that's when we're able to effectively inoculate ourselves to them, because they use this flowery language that people don't understand to confuse people and to make people believe that they're just talking about everything being fair and people being treated well and making society better and all that. They can't trick you if you know the trick. You become immune to their bullshit. And I promise you, again, it's a lot more widespread than what people think it is. This is not just a couple people. This is vast swabs of our society are doing this.
United against the private nuclear household, i.e. patriarchal capitalist, social reproduction.
Social reproduction, ding.
Yeah. So, the role of children within feminism.
Got my coffee now. Now I'm getting a beer.
That I think I want to see underlined in the 21st century once again. The crucial sort of centrality.
Does anyone else want a beer? I want a beer.
Of children's bodily autonomy, children's own ideas about who they want to live with, how they want to live.
Let's do the cotton candy beer.
It makes sense, to multiply work over and over and over inside every single apartment and home, labor like laundry, labor like cooking,
Well, not exactly. So Amy says, so children in my family will end up being raised by people we disagree with if they win. Well, Amy, I don't know if your kids are in the public schools, but if your kids are in the public schools, they are already being raised by people you disagree with, because kids usually spend more time in the public schools than they do with their own family. If your kids are, if they win, the kids will be the property of the collective. I've heard Sophie say specifically she wants kids to have multiple sets of parents within the collective. Basically, the state owns the kids. The state decides how the kids are raised. You have no rights over them. And eventually you're going to figure out that they want all children born via surrogacy, and that's when the fun really begins.
In a sense, historically, it's almost been, useful to have children involved in these discussions because, children haven't had those kinds of norms naturalized in their minds so much compared to some grown-ups, and so when utopian architects and feminist urban planners talked about liberating children and women.
This is where Sophie talks about the kitchen. So what did she say? Hang on. Utopian architects and feminist urban planners. I want everyone to pay attention to this. This is when Sophie starts talking about how they're going to re-architect all of society in order to eliminate the private nuclear family and your private kitchen. They literally do have architects. They have societal planners that are figuring this stuff out. Because if they start making changes to society, that's going to impact the family unit. And it's like, it's going to be in a more subtle way where it's not going to come again. It's like, this isn't going to come from Big Brother, top down. There will be no more nuclear family. What they're doing is making small changes throughout society that's going to gradually push everyone in the direction they want to go in. So I want everyone to pay attention.
Kinds of norms naturalized in their minds so much compared to some grown-ups, and so when utopian architects and feminist urban planners talked about liberating children and women from the sort of work intensity of the private nuclear household, talked about putting kitchens in the public realm, kitchenless cities, which means you can cook privately if you want, if that gives you joy. But generally, food will be, prepared in the public space regardless, and you will be always able to get fed, in the common space. That's what a kitchenless city is. So,
all right, I gotta make a clip of this. I know I have a clip of this somewhere, but I want to make a clip again, just because I want to make it. I'm better at clipping now than I was in times past. But does everyone understand that? Do you want to know why they're creating 15-minute cities? Those are the utopian architects creating the 15-minute cities. And one of the things they're doing is they're creating kind of like central locations where they want to have community kitchens, where instead of cooking in your own kitchen in a private home, you go to the central community kitchen in order to get your food and in order to eat with other people in community. And this is one of the ways they want to destroy the nuclear family, because they believe that if, like, dinner time around the dinner table, that's one of the things that keeps the family together. So if they can get rid of the dinner table, the private nuclear family dinner table, and the family has to go and eat with other people, that is inherently going to make them all more part of the collective. Does everyone understand that? Let's see. I want to make a clip, but I did see a question come in. Well, I just explained this like less than 10 minutes ago. So why is it important for an average Joe to know what his enemies believe? Do you want to beat your enemies? Do you want to win? Or do you want your enemies to win? Because if you don't understand your enemy, then you are perpetually going to be solving for the wrong problem. Right now, the entire conservative right is chasing after phantoms that don't exist. And they're constantly trying to solve for the wrong problem. The conservative right is never going to defeat these people. They don't even know these people exist. So if you want to keep losing to these people, go ahead and keep ignoring what they're saying, bro. But I just don't think that's a very good strategy. Do you want to know when you're running into far leftists in the real world? Do you want to know when you're hearing far leftist language show up all around you so that you can inoculate yourself to it and you know exactly what you're interacting with? If you don't understand their language, they have all the power over you. So you're literally putting yourself beneath them if you don't understand what they're saying. This is like you moving to France and you expecting to be able to go find a job or exist in polite society without learning French. It's not going to work. You have to learn their language. Right now, they control everything in society. If you want them to forever be in control of everything, continue to ignore it and just see how that works out for you. Can other people in the chat explain that while I set up this clip? I would really appreciate that. But I do want to go back and get this clip. Hang on. This is one of my favorite clips of all time. I'm going to go back a little bit more. Okay. Starting the clip. Come on, clipping tool. Start. There we go.
like cooking, in a sense, historically, it's almost been, useful to have children involved in these discussions because, children haven't had those kinds of norms naturalized in their minds so much compared to some grown-ups, and so when utopian architects and feminist urban planners talked about liberating children and women from the sort of work intensity of the private nuclear household, talked about putting kitchens in the public realm, kitchenless cities, which means you can cook privately if you want, if that gives you joy, but generally food will be prepared in the public space regardless, and you will be always able to get fed in the common space. That's what a kitchenless city is. So instead of having infinite multiplication, every single home has a laundry, an oven, a fridge, etc., which is just kind of bananas on some level, right? Like ecologically as much as anything else. you know, you would consider certain needs to be meetable and automatically, naturally to be met in, you know, appropriate to be met in the public and common space rather than turned inward to be met by kin, right? And it's about those needs and the direction we point them in, you know. And you can trace the sort of the way that responsibilities and needs were kind of pointed, you know, inward like that, right back to the enclosures in, you know, medieval Europe, where laws were passed. You know, Melinda Cooper kind of takes it from the enclosures to the poor laws.
All right, that's a good clip. That's a good clip. Hey, can someone do me a favor? Can someone go over to Big Tech's chat and can they tell him that Mike Harlow's real name is Michael Bernstein, and I'm not doxing him. I'm not giving away information that's not public. This is all public information. But can someone please go over to Big Tech's chat and explain to him that he is literally playing a Jew on his channel right now? He is literally playing a Jewish smear campaign on his channel right now. And I just don't think that's a good look. Perhaps Big Tech, who is a literal Nazi, he's a National Socialist, he doesn't like Jews at all, but right now, and for probably the last hour and a half, he has literally been playing a Jewish smear campaign on his channel because Mike Harlow's last name is Bernstein. Can someone please go explain that to him? Do I have any volunteers? I would just really like for that to happen. Hey, Rottweiler, can you pop into his chat and explain to him that he's literally playing a Jew on his channel right now? Can someone do that? Yeah, Bernstein like the Bernstein Bears. Mike Harlow's father is a Grammy Hall of Fame producer named Saul Bernstein. Mike Harlow's grandfather was in the Rat Pack. Yeah, oy vey. Oy vey. He's not... Big Tech isn't a very good National Socialist, is he? Like, really, bro, not so lazy, not doing any research on his own. My God. Does anyone have a Kick account that's willing to go do this? I'll fucking do it. I'll fucking log in and be like, I hope you know that Mike Harlow's name is Michael Bernstein, you fucking moron. Can someone please just do this so I don't have to do it? But I will do it if I need. Where the fuck is Yasmin?
Where the destitute and surplus populations of Europe were made into the legal.
Oh, that's a good point. He probably has someone watching me right now, so he probably knows.
Not of the collective, but of kin, and that, in a sense, is one of the origin points of our gender.
Listen, I personally don't care if people are Jewish, but the person that is trolling me right now, he really does care if people are Jewish. So I'm merely pointing out that the person he's showing on his stream right now, yes, Kazmar did it. Thank you. I'm just merely pointing out that Mike Harlow is a Jew. And maybe Big Tech should have looked into that a little bit more before he played a Jewish smear campaign on his channel. And really, if Big Tech buys into what Mike Harlow says at all, that kind of undercuts his entire worldview, if he's being ethically honest about what his worldview is. All right, back to this.
General sense that, you know, we are responsible and identifiable only with our own, and that we look out for our own, we draw a circle, you know, and we compete, you know, as a team in a sense, and in a sense kind of acquiesce to this blackmail that means that love for one another has to be interpreted as the act of laying down our lives in wage work for each other's survival, as though. Did you
say to him specifically that Mike Harlow's last name is Bernstein? Because that's really going to be the important point. Big Tech doesn't care if he's swimming with the lowest of the low. That's actually what Big Tech wants. He wants to be swimming with the lowest of the low. But like, did you explain to him that he's literally playing a Jew on his channel right now as a credible source of information? Because that is something that his audience cares about. That's something that he cares about. So you got to go right to the heart of things, man. This is why we watch socialists. We watch socialists to understand what they care about, to understand their language. And in the same way, Big Tech was very nice to educate me about what socialists really, or excuse me, what National Socialists really believe and what people like him believe, which means he might not be wanting to play a Jew on his channel as a credible source of information. I'm just saying. Yep, Big Tech blames Jews and Christianity for his upbringing and his personal breakup with his family and father. Exactly. Exactly.
It had to be that way, right?
Okay, great. We're going to go to our stack of questions.
Oh, good. Q&A.
And I might interject throughout because some of them are very similar to some questions that I have. But our first one is from Julia, who says, would love to know how your new book connects to your last book, Full Surrogacy Now. What was your journey from the last book to this one? Does it continue / expand upon certain themes from Full Surrogacy? And are you hoping for a different audience between the two books? You're excited to read, and thanks for your important work.
Oh, thank you for that great question. Yeah, it's really interesting. I didn't expect Full Surrogacy Now to be read as widely as it was, and in a sense my whole life changed when it was read so widely, because it enabled me to make a living outside of the academy and to think about writing more seriously and centrally and perhaps in a more accessible way. I do think that Abolish the Family is an easier read on some level. Although, you know, I think Full Surrogacy Now also was on a line between.
Yeah, that's right. Sophie's other book is called Full Surrogacy Now. Sophie wants to abolish the family and then wrote a book called Full Surrogacy Now. I just want everyone to think about what that means.
Scholarly and sort of non-scholarly in terms of its tone. Although who knows what a scholarly tone is. But I think the audiences I'm trying to reach with Abolish the Family are more diverse, because Full Surrogacy Now came out of a PhD about the political economy of the gestational, you know, pregnancy, contract pregnancy industry.
Okay, bro, I'm literally not going to argue with you about this. If you want to learn what socialists say and what socialists believe, then you can stay. If you don't think it's important, then go watch something else. But the fact of the matter is that until normal people learn this, you will be perpetual losers to the far left. So if you want to just keep arguing and complaining, like, I don't think I need to spend the time to learn this for reasons X, Y, B, and Z, then you're going to lose to them. You're going to lose your kids to them. They are going to rule over you, and it will be entirely your own fault. And don't say I didn't warn you, bro. But if you don't think you need to be here, go watch something else. There's millions of other things you can watch on the internet that are far more entertaining than this. But what I'm not going to do is entertain a discussion where you're saying that none of us really need to be here right now, because there are people who want to be here. There are people who want to learn this, and this is disruptive to what we're doing.
Surrogacy, as we currently call it, but then trying to do a philosophical, you know, inversion of the buried claims inside the word surrogacy in the present, what capitalist bioclinicians say surrogacy is, and trying to think whether that could still, you know, persevere in a world in which we, you know, we no longer thought that pregnancy generates essentially private property, you know, and that children can only have one mother, and so on and so forth, you know. Yeah, so it's really about the sort of utopian idea that one day we might not just, which we already are, be the makers of one another, but also learn to act like it, which is the crucial point, because currently the ways that surrogates kind of manufacture everybody, all of us, and certainly the private nuclear households, the family home image, which is looks like it's autonomous, but actually has all these kind of shadowy figures who get cut out of the family photo.
I've already explained this 2 or 3 times.
That's a form of surrogation. It's just essentially reproductive stratification, to use Shelley Colin's term. It's capitalism, it's class, it's colonialism.
Did she actually say this? I must have missed this. Did she actually say pregnancy generates private property? Because I got to go back and clip that if she did. Why does pregnancy generate private property under this worldview? No, all of their arguments are around the idea of abolishing capitalism. Hang on, I gotta go back and get that. I apologize, guys. I wasn't paying close enough attention. Pregnancy essentially holy shit, you're right. See, Jeremiah, a tip of the hat to Jeremiah, who's new here, doesn't really understand the language, and picked up something that I didn't. Bro, that doesn't happen all that often, so congrats to you. Hang on. Let me just clip that, because that's going to be important. Appreciate you guys letting me do this. We're getting so much good stuff tonight. This is a really productive episode. Guys, as a reminder, remember in 90 minutes, you can stick around for the premiere on the channel of Big Tech's epic unhinged meltdown last night, if you want to see drama. But let's grab this clip.
Economy of the gestational, pregnancy, contract pregnancy industry, surrogacy, as we currently call it, but then trying to do a philosophical inversion of the buried claims inside the word surrogacy in the present, what capitalist bioclinicians say surrogacy is, and trying to think whether that could still, persevere in a world in which we no longer thought that pregnancy generates essentially private property, and that children can only have one mother, and so on and so forth, so it's really about
hang on, I got it. Pregnancy generates private property. That goes back to the idea that children are the private property of their parents. That goes directly to their argument about parental rights being a form of private property. This is why we also have Sophie Lewis on video from just a couple months ago saying fuck parental rights, because she believes that pregnancy, having children within the nuclear family, generate a form of private property. And when socialists say they want to abolish capitalism, they mean all private property. Really good note, Jeremiah. I would have missed that. That's a great clip.
The sort of utopian idea that one day we might not just, which we already are, be the makers of one another, but also learn to act like it, which is the crucial point. Because currently, the ways that surrogates kind of manufacture everybody, all of us, and certainly the private nuclear households, the family home image, which looks like it's autonomous, but actually has all these kind of shadowy figures who get cut out of the family photo. That's a form of surrogation. It's just essentially reproductive stratification, to use Shelley Colin's term. It's capitalism, it's class, it's colonialism,
capitalism, class, colonialism.
Surrogacy, another surrogacy is possible, right? So that was where I was going with that book, and it kind of took abolition of the family as almost as a starting point, or as a kind of an assumption, really, which it turns out not everybody has heard of or agrees with. So I was asked, in a sense, to clarify what that part of my politics is, and what it has meant historically to other movements. That's sort of one answer to that. There's also been a clarification for me of some of my thinking. One of the things I didn't address nearly enough really was the racial character of the family, the settler colonial formation of the family in the United States, for example. And so really part of my, homework, part of my, trajectory between full surrogacy now and abolish the family was thinking really deeply about how family abolition is an anti-racist and a decolonial politics, and making up my mind about how to argue that convincingly
Again, those are all things that mean capitalism. Decolonization means removing the oppressive force of capitalism. It usually means removing the oppressive force of capitalism from land, but it can also mean other things too, like decolonize the school curriculum will be to remove influence that encourages capitalism from the school curriculum. That is very literally what anti-racist education is. Anti-racist education is about educating children in a way that will lead to a socialist world because it is a decolonized form of education. That's because whiteness means capitalism, as I already explained earlier.
And becoming more sure about that component, basically, thanks to lots of conversations I had in the interim with people who were a little bit, startled about how it would work in their organizing contexts as anti-racists or, migrant justice activists. So I hope you read that part of the book and and form your own opinion, obviously. But in a sense, that was the work I had to do.
But I just combined my
so
two
I'm
Fruit
jumping
Loop
around with the
crimes.
questions a little bit, but this one is one of
So double
one
Fruit
from
Loops.
Itamar, which is family abolition in the nuclear family about the nuclear family, or is it also about abolishing extended families and biological kinship as such? And I sort of wanted to follow that.
That's a good
that
question
because it does seem like one of the
is abolishing the nuclear family about abolishing all biological kinship? Great question. Good night, Laura. Thanks for stopping by.
things I appreciate about many things I appreciate about Abolish the Family is that you're kind of clear at moments when you're departing from your previous work. And some of that seems to be a little bit around kinship and maybe like the kin and the difference between kin and kith, which I myself am not super well versed in. So maybe that question, but also if there's been some change in how you've been thinking about kinship along the two books, like alongside the two books.
Yeah, no, it's a great question, and certainly, as I maybe sort of indicated just a second ago, like one of the crucial questions really is which family, right? Which family are we abolishing? That's kind of the main, question asked and answered in my second chapter.
Nope. Don't do this. Don't do this. Don't do the typical conservative thing, Chris. Don't do this. This is a conservative argument. Sophie was probably raised by Marxists. She's probably a second generation Marxist or even a third generation Marxist. This is her value set. This is not about her being mentally ill. This is not about her being damaged. This is not about any of those things. The far left have different values than you do. Oftentimes, they come from Marxist parents. They're raised in Marxist households. They played with other Marxist kids growing up. This is not about them being damaged. It is about a completely different value set and a completely different view of the world. And every single time people say this is just mental illness, this is childhood trauma, she always had a bad relationship with her family, all this stuff, which is actually true. Sophie did have a bad relationship with her father. She wrote about it in one of her books. But that's not the source of what we're talking about. The source is a completely different set of values.
I think it's the second chapter. I couldn't figure out whether the history or the anti-racist argument should come first. But basically, it's not just the nuclear, it's not just the white, it's not just the bourgeois family.
All those things being capitalism.
It's the capitalist family. Bourgeois, white, cis, heteropatriarchal, nuclear, those things are to some extent baked in. They're not always, mapped out one for one. It
doesn't matter if it doesn't matter at all if he disagrees. It makes no difference. Like, reality is reality, and commentators on the fucking internet can say whatever they want. It doesn't actually make it real. Most commentators on the internet lie to their audiences all the time. Yes, I do think, yes. 100%.
The lived life of families. But guess what? The family is as many aspects of social discipline in, many sort of shibboleths of capitalist reality.
Shibboleths
it's a
of
fiction.
capitalist reality.
Like these families, where are they, right? It doesn't matter that a vast majority of us don't live in anything like, the image that I think you put on the poster for this event, with a big kind of no block sign over it to show abolition, I guess. Which I do want to say, is about simultaneous, transformation, destruction, preservation. Let's get into the nerdiness of the concept of abolition in a minute, right? But, yeah, in fact, let's do that in a minute. But no, it's unfortunately necessary to say, I kind of insist in this book, that all families, all private households, regardless of their composition, and again, many of us kind of fall short of the sort of idealized template, right? Participate in this, public-private matrix, which privatizes care into private nuclear household, private households, whether they're nuclear.
Jeremiah is asking a good question. If it's worldview and not damage, how do you help someone change? You can't help someone like Sophie. Sophie is a true believer in the cult. Sophie is never going to change this worldview. What we're trying to do is make sure more normal people understand the language, understand what they're doing, understand their tactics, understand how these ideas are getting implemented in the world. We can wake up normies. You can't de-indoctrinate people from a cult. This is a cult. Our only goal is to prevent more people from getting sucked into the cult and to help people recognize when the cult is showing up in their lives. Because there's still a lot of people who are not indoctrinated into the cult, but they don't know what they don't know. So that is what this is about.
Or not, sorry. And so we don't escape, right, by happening to be queer or by happening to be even in non-white formations, as sort of proletarians trying to form ourselves into households. We're participating.
I was never a socialist, no.
As a logic of work, right? So it's that's the bad news and the good news. I think people want to exclude the populations who seem closest to, a liberatory form of care from the politics of family abolition, right? So we have all these kinds of discourses, which I was very much participating in Full Surrogacy Now, sort of celebrating all the sort of extraordinary histories and skills that have been, generated at the margins of the family regime. And I don't sort of disavow that. I don't disavow that. I think, the forms of mothering against motherhood that have been generated by the descendants of captive populations, for example, or the refugees from the nuclear household of, in the form of queer children, those are the sort of, the closest thing I can point to in the present of sort of actually existing anti-families or whatever. But, they're not somehow outside of the totality of the capitalist privatization of care, So I think that's what I hadn't worked out how to say yet in Full Surrogacy Now. I was sort of saying real families against the family. And I think the step that I say further,
I haven't heard it, Tom,
the family, is that it might be necessary to, unsettle the romanticization of kinship as a metaphor for our solidarities with one another. You asked me about kith and kin. So
they want to replace biological kinship with solidarity. We just watched a presentation about solidarity the other day. Solidarity means being a comrade, being a member of the party, being part of the club. They want to replace the biological kinship of family with solidarity with the collective. Everyone understand that? That's not going to be possible, Tom. That is a fool's errand. That's stupid.
Historically, there used to be this other term used all the time, but it's kind of indicative that that one fell away, you know. So we're kind of, no one's heard of kith, K-I-T-H, and it was kith and kin, meaning kin formed through legal or blood relations, right? So if you're kin, there's a state sanctioned or
Listen, Donald, it does not matter how many times you ask the question. If you don't feel it's important to learn this stuff, you don't have to be here. And you will lose. You will lose badly. We've probably already lost to these people anyway. So if you want to go watch bullshit on the internet because it's more entertaining, go do that. I am not going to spend any time convincing people to do this if they don't want to do this, because I think we've already lost, quite frankly, because of attitudes like yours. This is very simple. Either you want to understand your enemy or you don't. And if you don't want to understand your enemy, go watch stupid videos about animals or like police chases or something else, and just drown in mindless entertainment while they kick your ass. That's your choice, bro. You either learn and have a slight minor little possibility of winning, or you peace out and you accept that we're totally fucked. Those are the options on the table. And I am not going to spend time debating this or arguing with this when I have a whole bunch of people in the chat who understand this and who do want to learn.
You know, a blood imaginary in your relationship. When you're kith, there's no such piece of paper or imagined piece of paper. You are basically bonded together through action, through place. That's
exactly
all, you know. But I think it's sort of interesting because we only use family metaphorically today, in shops, in airlines, in services, and also in, you know, very important emancipatory traditions, you know, such as, you know, Latinx and Black churches and so on. Like, you know, everyday language is about kinship. And I think I'm sort of interested in what it would mean to cultivate a different sort of measuring stick, right, for what commitment means, you know, because even though we don't think consciously about what we're saying when we use languages of kinship, I still think there's a sort of ghost of a thought there about how the only thing we can trust is something that is ratified, you know.
I mean, I'm not going to do this, but I do think that it is ironic that big tech is watching a Jew. I just think this is really deeply ironic that, again, Mike Harlow's real name is Michael Bernstein. Big tech cozying up with Jews now. He has nothing left on the dissident right but to cozy up with Jews. I just think it's a really stunning and brave choice.
Contingent. A connection that only God or the state through a really annoying legal process could dissolve. That's kind of what I'm saying when I, like, it's not what I think I'm saying, but it is kind of what I'm saying when I say we're family, right? Like, you couldn't walk away from me even if you wanted to. You know, you'd have to divorce me, and that's a hassle. You know, that's the form of security we think we need, because we don't actually trust on some level. And why should we, right? We are massively precaritized. You know, we're in a care crisis, so don't get me wrong, I understand. But like, we don't trust that we get up every morning and choose, you know, our love. Like, that love is, to quote Ursula Le Guin, you know, something that we remake every day, make new, like bread. I mean, that's not the right quote, but it's something similar to, you know, I'm almost saying that it's about putting faith in labor rather than, you know, the state, that or in a sort of, you know, religiously inflected concept of kinship as identity, you know, and reproduction. as a vehicle for immortality, but just like putting pressure in, putting faith, in, you know, our decisions every day, you know, to make kinship, because kinship actually is made, not given, you know, which kind of undermines.
Thank you, Human Centipede.
You know, the invocation of it as a sort of safety net. Anyway, sorry, this gets a little bit too philosophical, perhaps. I'm sort of suggesting in this new book, really, that all the forms of, you know, liberatory kin making that I do still celebrate do not in and of themselves sort of amount to family abolitionism, which I actually locate kind of somewhere else, maybe surprisingly or paradoxically. I sort of, I kind of want to say, don't try this at home, kids. Like, it's not really about going home and being like, right, how do I abolish the family here in my family, right? I actually locate the kernel of family abolition almost, you know, in the streets. Like, it's when we meet one another in the realm of the social, which, according to Michelle Barrett and Mary McIntosh, the Marxist feminists in the 80s who were keeping alive family abolition, is the sort of antithesis of the family. The social and the family in their book, which they call the anti-social family, are kind of antitheses. So if you want to learn how to abolish the family, you first have to sort of like exit the family and meet
I agree.
in the, you know, and form the social, revive the dream of sociality.
So this is important. What she is saying, that in order for what they need to do to abolish the nuclear family, what they need to do is architect society in a way where people are congregating around the collective community rather than kind of what Sophie might say is isolating themselves with the family. So this is one of those things where it's going to be tricky, right? Because being around other people in your community is not a bad thing, right? You want to have relationships with the people you live with. You want to have relationships with your neighbors. You want everyone to be friends and all that. So that's not necessarily a bad thing. But what I want people to understand is they're going to try to implement like laws and policies and societal structures via their utopian architects to push people to spending more time within the collective than they do with their own family. This is part of what they do with public school, by the way. Most kids spend more time in public school than they do with their families. And in doing so, what they think is going to happen is it's going to break down the biological kinship that tends to hold people together. This is why they want to get rid of private kitchens, private dinners around the nuclear family dinner table. They want to replace that with the collective, having lunch and dinner in the community kitchen where everyone goes to get their rations. Yes, actually, yeah, it's like the Smurfs. Yeah, exactly. So you got to pay attention to these things because, again, this is about little changes over time that are going to push people to spending more time within the collective unit rather than in their home with their family, which, again, not necessarily a bad thing. I'm not saying people shouldn't be like, I'm not saying people should lock themselves in their homes with their families. It's more about re-architecting society very gradually so that people don't understand what's happening. Does everyone understand that?
Social and the family in their book, which they call the anti-social family, are kind of antitheses. So if you want to learn how to abolish the family, you first have to sort of like exit the family and meet in the, you know, and form the social, revive the dream of sociality, and sort of almost learn what it would be like in the process of insurgency, you know, to reimagine relations completely, you know. So it's actually in the context of protest kitchens and mass occupations, you know, mass, you know, rioting and struggle, high intensity struggle, that I kind of locate the, you know, step one of abolishing the family, which is maybe not a very satisfactory answer because people always want to know, how do we do this? What do you mean concretely? Do you mean kibbutzes? Do you mean communes? Do you mean like going to Vermont and, you know,
I know that word now. I didn't know that word before.
Parenting lots of kids with lots of other couples or whatever. Like, you know, none of that.
Do you mean kibbutzes, just like in Israel? That's funny.
seems to me, really like the structural solution that I'm envisaging. But also I'm a theorist, not a policymaker. And, the history of critical utopianism is, an honorable one that sometimes tolerates a certain amount of unknowing. It's about a method of denaturalization of the given.
Actually, I'm going to go back and clip that. I apologize. I feel like that's a clip that the Groypers will appreciate. Okay, hang on. Literally saying that she wants to organize society like a kibbutz in order to abolish the nuclear family. See, I never would have noticed. You got to give big tech credit sometimes. Like, I never would have noticed this before that. That's fine. He taught me some important things.
Of sociality and sort of almost learn what it would be like in the process of insurgency, to reimagine relations completely, so it's actually in the context of protest kitchens and mass occupations, mass, rioting and struggle, high intensity struggle, that I kind of locate the, step one of abolishing the family, which is maybe not a very satisfactory answer, because people always want to know, how do we do this? What do you mean concretely? Do you mean kibbutzes? Do you mean communes? Do you mean like going to Vermont and, cooperatively parenting lots of kids with lots of other couples or whatever? Like, none of that seems to me, really like the structural solution that I'm envisaging. But also I'm a theorist, not a policymaker. And, the history of critical utopianism is, an honorable one that sometimes tolerates a certain amount of unknowing. It's about a method of denaturalization of the given, and of cultivating the feeling of a widespread entitlement to desire, more, to feel that one deserves more, than the family, for the sake of one's family, for example. I really do reaffirm and insist that if you love the people currently in your family, you might be curious about what it might be like to love them outside of a matrix of coercion and blackmail.
Thank you, Sophie. We love you, Sophie. We appreciate you. Hang on, let me just make sure this clip is saved. Yes, it is. All right, guys, I need to go visit the little socialist room. So I'm just going to let this video play and I'll be back in a minute. Take good notes for me. Let me know if I miss anything. No, I didn't want to stop. Oh, wrong one.
Concrete proposals, institutionally speaking, that would define family abolition for Lewis. What would it mean for children in the household schooling? I think you kind of cover that with this sort of idea that in these sort of like revolutionary moments, like maybe some of what we saw happening in Philadelphia in 2020, but maybe another way to sort of get towards some of those questions is a question that I also had for you, which is like, what are some moments or experiments or occupations where you see the beginnings of family abolition? Or are there things that, we can't go home and just, live family abolitionistly in the context of our family, but are there some kinds of propositions that would be helpful? And also this sort of brings up, I know that Cuba has a new family code, which I thought was interesting because it like outlaws commercial surrogacy, but it allows all these different kinds of family formation. So maybe it's also, we could also talk a little bit about that as we're thinking of sort of more not to thrust you as a theorist, since I'm also a theorist, into the world of concrete, but maybe have some of those moments and policies that do sort of maybe make it easier down the line to sort of think through what a world where everyone is family and no one is family looks like.
Well, I mean, as well, you know, I
I'm back.
suspect we will always have, you know, the desire to live with certain people until, you know, cohabiting.
No, she's non-binary.
is
Sophie's non-binary.
We have a need for shelter, right, and a need for intimacy. So it's not about doing away with all kinds of like preferences for certain people and relationships, you know. But you know, a concrete example of the sort of practices that inspire me in a family abolitionist way, or as a family abolition related kind of you know, phenomenon.
Yasmin, where were you? I needed you to do something for me like half an hour ago. Okay, maybe you had other things to do. Yasmin, can you go over to Big Tech's channel and remind him that Mike Harlow's real last name is Bernstein? And you just think, after you guys had such a great chat earlier, and you just think it's a little unseemly for Big Tech to be, I don't know, playing a literal Jewish propaganda campaign on his channel, since he is in fact a National Socialist that really likes Hitler and really hates Jews. No, I'm not going to watch that. I'm sure you did a great job, but we're doing socialism right now. I just want you to go tell Big Tech, because you guys are such good friends now, that that Mike Harlow's last name is Bernstein, which makes him quite literally Jewish. He's really going to like this. Yasmin, I promise you, he's going to love this. He's going to love the fact that he is literally playing a Jewish smear campaign on his channel right now. And I just think that his audience needs to be informed of that, because his audience doesn't really like the chosen people either. Like, I don't really care. Well, I know, but you did go on his channel. I've never met him in real life. I don't plan to ever meet him in real life. So who the hell knows? I mean, I think he's kind of embarrassed about his looks, to be honest, because he covers up his face. He can make fun of my looks all he wants, but I don't cover myself up on the internet. My webcam is literally hanging off my computer monitor. It's not at any special angle. It's like right in front of me, right here. Like, I'm not in silhouette. I'm not in shadow form. You guys can see what I look like. I'm literally just sitting Indian style in an office chair right now. There's nothing special about what I'm doing. Anyway. Yeah, I know you did, Yasmin. I just know you have a Kick account. So not everyone here, like basically no one here has a Kick account, and I know you do. And so can you just go in his chat and tell him that Mike Harlow's last name is Bernstein? Because Mike Harlow uses a stage name, the Grand High Harlot. Yes, he does. But yeah, just tell him Mike Harlow's last name is Bernstein. Mike Harlow's father is Saul Bernstein. He's in the Grammy Hall of Fame. Like, he's going to love this.
Phenomenon was, well, I mean, in 2006, there was an extraordinary teachers protest in Oaxaca in Mexico. You know, large numbers of people, many of them women. At one point, 3,000 police attacked them. That because they've been occupying the central square of the city.
Please tell him that Mike Harlow is literally Jewish and that his last name is Bernstein.
For over a month. And you know, the conflagrations sort of only
that's because
they're
best friends,
support and strength.
So they use the same material.
Women were very much kind of leading.
Oh, good.
The transformation of what was.
I'm really glad that Big Tech is elevating Jewish people on his channel again. Like, he's really alienated basically like everyone, it kind of seems like, on the right, and so it only makes sense that he would be, you know, deciding to change his ways, because nothing more than an opportunist and giving up on everything he purported to believe and all that. I think this is a really good step for him to admit what he really is publicly to the world, which is someone who will literally say anything and do anything in order to get attention on the internet. It's just, you know, the first step is admitting that you have a problem. Can't do real content. He has to do Jewish smear campaigns instead.
Originally a sort of teacher strike into what was eventually called the Oaxaca commune, you know, explicitly referencing the Paris commune. And there were these sorts of insurgent forms of social reproduction, according to people who reported in English about the events. The barricades were places where the people of Oaxaca slept, cooked, and shared food, had sex, shared news, and came together at the end of the day. This is from a piece by Baruch Peller about this. What's interesting about this is that the family, in a sense, was part of the downfall of this commune, because by many accounts, lots of the women had frustrated husbands.
Check this out.
Who sort of pulled their wives.
So Sophie is talking about this commune that got set up in South America, in which like the women all left their homes to go to go be a part of this commune and to go feed the commune and all that stuff. And it was the nuclear family that broke up this protest that was centered around this commune, because the husbands were like, what the hell, where's our dinner? And the wives were all out gallivanting around at this commune. And so they had this really strong protest going, and they actually blamed the nuclear family for dissolving the protest because the wives had to go home and cook for their husbands. Everyone understand that? Yeah, well, it might be. I don't know exactly where. I don't know where Oaxaca. I don't know, but it's some. It's in the what do they call it? What is the socialist name for third world? What the fuck is it? I'm forgetting. This is like a weed-induced memory loss. I forget. It'll come back to me. Global South. Thank you. Global South. See, this is why my chat is so smart. When I have weed-induced short-term memory loss, my chat comes through. This is the Global South.
Wives back into the private household because they felt, emasculated, underserved, underfed.
There was a time when I knew it.
But these are the Oaxaca commune was really a moment of sort of.
Oh yeah. That's it. That's even more important, Lars. Not only is Mike Harlow Jewish, Mike Harlow is literally gay. And you know the other thing? Actually, someone tell this to Big Tech too. Does he know that Mike Harlow is literally gay and uses conservative events to seduce straight men? He really does. I have text messages from Mike Harlow going back, years now, where Mike Harlow used to text me about all the straight men in the conservative movement that he was trying to seduce. He would text me when he got one of them into their bed, and I would get a picture of it on the phone, like, look what I did last night. Ha 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 ha. So can someone go tell Big Tech that not only is Mike Harlow Jewish, Mike Harlow literally gets off on using right-leaning events to seduce straight men. Mike Harlow's a top too. I know Big Tech will probably be surprised about that, but Mike Harlow literally gets off on getting straight men to let him fuck them in the ass. Can someone please go and tell that to Big Tech? Don't shoot the messenger. I know that I know a lot more about this stuff than he does. But maybe Big Tech is posturing himself. I think Mike Harlow might find him very attractive, right? Maybe Big Tech is making more moves than just moving over to engaging with the Jewish community. Maybe Big Tech really just wants Mike Harlow to bend him over and fuck him. And that's why he's playing a Jew on his channel right now. Stranger things have happened.
Radical possibility, I think, by all accounts, for people who realized that the atomized isolation of capitalist domesticity could in fact be challenged, could be thrown off, could be, even if only for a few months, unmade, I would also say, maybe a little bit more pragmatically, and I don't know if everyone wants to hear this, but in my opinion, almost every form of political struggle or campaign or movement that aims to bring about infrastructures of provisioning and nurturance in the public realm is in a sense related to family abolition, or family abolitionist, if you like, because it's the right to the city, for example, right? Having a materialized, not just an abstract right to be in the public space, to have one's needs met there. Ultimately, a lot of different leftist or left adjacent struggles are kind of aiming at that, and often there is no syllable, no hint of criticism of the family as part of that, because, and that's fine. I'm not saying like right now, people should sort of change their messaging and say, because, family is an organized structure of scarcity, and because we should be, diminishing the importance and the role of family in society, we are funding the public gardens in Philadelphia. You don't have to do that bit. It could still be true, but
also true, Sin. Also true. Yeah.
I'm not necessarily sure that family abolition is, as sometimes people ask me to explain, some sort of politics that you organize under the banner of, if that makes sense. I think it's one of those subcomponents of the abolition of the present state of things that we don't want to ever separate from the rest of it, right? I hope this has been obvious or implicit so far from everything I've said, but just in case, don't separate this from the struggle against capitalism. Bad things could happen if you did try. But since we were kind of circling around it, let's briefly touch on the meaning of abolition and when, basically.
Yes, let's touch on that, Sophie. Good idea.
Chat that someone was sort of suggesting,
abolition.
It sounds like a really different kind of use of the word abolition.
What does abolition mean? Pop quiz for the chat. Everyone refocus. I know we're having fun calling big tech a gay Jew, but everyone refocus. What does abolition mean? Before we get to Sophie's definition of abolition, what do we believe abolition means? Hang on, did Jeremiah have a question? Sophie is a very unique queer Marxist, and this is why we play so much Sophie on my channel. She's very palatable. She has a good attitude. She's generally happy. Her language is not as flowery as most people's language are. So this is why Sophie is such an amazing resource, because she's actually not bad to watch. She's a pleasant person to watch. We really do appreciate Sophie. I'm not joking around. We have watched more Sophie content than anyone else on the internet. Okay, abolition. Abolition. What does abolition mean? Abolition is the struggle. Abolition means to free, the struggle to free yourself from capitalism, the destruction of capitalism, abolish capitalism. Yup, it can be used pretty interchangeably with liberation. Abolish capitalism. Free yourself from the capitalist oppressive system. Abolish the family. Exactly. Abolition means getting rid of the structures of the capitalist system and ultimately capitalism together. Now, most commonly when you hear the word abolition in conjunction with the far left, what they mean is prison abolition, police abolition, abolish the police, defund the police, because they believe that the police are the managers of private property, and so the police are protecting the system of capitalism. But it can also be used more generally just to indicate freeing oneself from capitalism. Freedom from capitalism and normality. Oh, Sophie's Instagram is great. I love Sophie's Instagram. Sophie posts some saucy pictures on there. Means the abolition of private property, to abolish and destroy and outlaw a system. Exactly. Let's see what Sophie says the definition of abolition is.
Than is operative in the horizon of prison abolition or abolition of the police. And I actually just wanted to explain. No, in my opinion, actually no, funnily enough. And that's a sort of sensibility I take from Ruthie Wilson-Gilmore, who, as you also were remarking to me, Miranda, understand.
See, listen, Jeremiah, you found your home here, bro. You are such a quick learner. Is it an oversimplification to say the Venn diagram for socialism has abolished capitalism at the center? No, bro, that's exactly right. That's exactly right. In fact, I'm making this exact image for my Substack. I have it on my list of 87 things to do. Literally, if you will understand socialism, if you understand that it is a Venn diagram with capitalism at the center and every other issue they talk about. So race, gender, queer, environmental justice, social justice, universal health care, parental rights, literally every, like the workplace, abolish the police, every issue relates back to abolishing capitalism. And once you understand that, and once you start to see through that these issues are not separate and distinct, they are all related to the primary goal of abolishing capitalism, which is defined as private property ownership. Very well done. Yes, on Sophie's Instagram, you will see pictures of Sophie's boobs. You will see pictures of Sophie shooting a gun. You will see pictures of Sophie with her friends and family. You'll see Sophie's tarot card deck that she made out of memes, which is actually kind of cool. Sophie's Instagram is great. I highly recommend.
And the matter of abolition as a sort of as a presencing, a question of presence and building, not of kind of tearing down and deleting. And so actually the question of abolition for her when it comes to the criminal justice system is about the making of real justice, not simply the sort of destruction of the present infrastructure that pretends to deliver justice, right? So in the capitalist present, all the institutions that constitute capitalist justice are a kind of, evil joke, like of justice, right? A travesty of justice, And so abolition is kind of working with the tiny little filament inside that system that has something going for it, like our desire to be safe, our desire for justice, right? Which again is not what is delivered by the current system, but it kind of is propped up partly by our collective desire for that thing, right? So abolition is not really about setting fire.
Really? There's a picture of Sophie wearing a "Be Gay, Do Crime" shirt? Sophie! Apparently I haven't checked Sophie's Instagram recently enough. Sophie. See, I fucking love Sophie, man. I need to revisit the idea of getting Sophie to come on the channel. Sophie was open. The last time I approached Sophie about this, Sophie said, I don't want anyone to think we're in solidarity. And I said, don't worry, Sophie. We're going to explain. We are not in solidarity. We are absolutely not in solidarity. We are enemies. We are mortal enemies. But can you still come on my channel and talk to me? And she said, I'm going to give it some thought. And then she never got back to me. And then October 7th happened. And just there were other stuff going on. But I really think that Sophie owes this to us. So I have elevated Sophie's content to thousands of people who would never see it otherwise. We've always been very nice to Sophie. She's our favorite. We now agree on the Palestine issue. We have so much in common. Sophie and I are both Aries. Sophie and I both agree that Israel is committing a genocide in Palestine. We both feel very strongly about this issue. Like, I just think it's a good idea. Sophie needs to come on my channel.
To all the prisons and all the police stations, although great. Like it's not that, but if you did that to all of the prisons and all of the police stations today, you wouldn't have abolished the carceral, justice system. You wouldn't even have come close, right? Abolition is where you've created the world that would make that system unthinkable, truly a strange, weird memory, like for us, it's quite hard to imagine. I mean, of course, slavery still exists in the present, right? And abolition is still an ongoing process with regard to slavery, but we can't really, it's very hard, I think, for many people today to imagine what it was like to have an overarching system of everyday normalized chattel slavery, And that's what we would be. That abolition is the day where really we almost can't imagine it at all anymore, right? And that's what like prison abolition would also be. The day where no one can imagine putting people in cages. the state doing that on a mass scale, right? That would be the day where we have abolished. And family is in a sense, it has a utopian kernel, right? It's this dream that, people can be unconditionally loved. I mentioned earlier, M.E. O'Brien, and there's something very moving in her book, which I've been reading. It's coming out next year, where she describes, the George Floyd uprising and the sort of moments of family abolitionist desire.
Hang on, Claire, you're not quite getting it. Claire says, if you have a kid, you can pawn them off on the village and not have to take care of them. No, Claire, it's not that at all. It's that no one is going to have parental rights. It's that it's not an option for the state to raise your kids. It is the only answer. It is the only, it's not like you have the choice of, do you get to raise your kids or do you get to pawn them off on someone else? It's your kids are owned by the state. They are not your kids. Parental rights do not exist. It's all kids. You do not have a choice in the matter. You just give birth and then the state takes it from there. And in some cases, you might not even be the one giving birth anymore because they want all kids to be born via surrogacy. And when I say surrogacy, I don't necessarily mean human surrogacy for that long, because there are these birthing pods that they've been working on. They've also been trying to experiment, and I'm not making this up. There was an actual article in a medical journal, I covered it on my Substack, in which they're trying to figure out how to gestate children in the bodies of brain dead people. So that's what we're talking about here. It's so much worse than this, it's not even funny. There will be no fathers, no mothers, just donors and birthing persons and artificial wombs. That's what we're talking about here. That's what all this leads to. Do you guys understand now why I said this is the most dystopian shit you'll see all week?
Might be able to read in that struggle. She actually looked at George Floyd's crying out for his mother while dying, under the boot of the police officer, Derek Chauvin. And I really admire her analysis there, because it's a crucial component, I think, of the sensibility of abolition that I'm reaching for myself as well. She writes that, family abolition has to be an affirmation of that, of that call for his mother that George Floyd sort of uttered in his dying moments, not some kind of dismissal of it. M.E. O'Brien talks about Martin Luther King's vision of the beloved community, and I sort of see that as a very sort of noble, historical, link.
Offensive saint. They created Floyd.
Our hopes.
It was all them.
Tender, fragile, needy animals. That our mothers, in every sense. And as I say, I think mothering is a diffuse labor. Will come to our aid, right? Our neediness in moments of horror and brutalization. Right. That's actually what family, the kernel is, that I actually kind of want to abolish, in the sense of preserve, because abolition does have a negation in it, but it also has, something about holding on, so that, again, with prisons, it's this idea that, we can find justice.
Don't make me answer that, Rottweiler. Please don't make me answer that.
With families, the love between people is, I think, not served well by the infrastructure of privatized households in capitalism. So it's actually about that relation between people, that mother love, if you like, and other forms as well, being generalized,
no, Jeremiah, they don't see
across all of society. Who knows what that would look like, but it's about, making sure that everyone actually gets to feel what it would be like red love is what Alexandra Kollontai calls this. Love, to be held, to be known, to be cared for outside.
Red love. You know what that reminds me of when we were watching the Evergreen State documentary from Benjamin Boyce like a couple weeks ago? Red love reminds me of community love, community love, community love, community love, red love. Amy, you give a crap what she thinks because she is very influential and pushing some crazy ideas. And if you don't give a crap what she thinks, then you're going to have your kids taken away from you and you're not even going to realize what happened. That's why.
Side of a system of economic coercion. I think I've said this now 3 times, but organized scarcity, which we then become very attached to because it's all we have. And in a moment where utopianism seems like something we can't afford, we find it very difficult to let go of the things to which we are attached, even when we recognize, their limitations. It's very scary, incredibly scary. My entire opening chapter is devoted to the psychological reaction we have, all of us, me included, to the idea of being manufactured in some different way outside of the isolated intensity of the sort of, usually parental dyad, 2 people or 1 or maybe a couple more, but, yeah, and I recognize that and I honor it and I don't want to shy away from it because I think that all really serious revolutionary politics actually contains something somewhat frightening of that kind,
Okay, we're going to jump to a different question from Hero, who asks, or states, you mentioned that you think cis women, trans people, gender non-conforming people, etc., as a class can fight as a class against the patriarchal family. Could you say a little bit more about what makes this group a class and why, if them being conceived as a class is important for family abolition?
Yeah, so I am not personally invested in the sort of sex class analysis of this so-called second wave, and I admit I sort of was speaking. I possibly misspoke when I used that terminology, although I think increasingly I've noticed theorists using the word class in a slightly looser sense as well. It's kind of having a comeback. I think the notion of sort of in different, anyway, I sorry, that's a rabbit hole I could go into. Just to say, I don't propose that there is a sex.
Listen. This is just my opinion. Everyone has to make their own choices. Amy says, my grown kids are libertarians. I support that. I can't vote for Biden, but I detest Trump. I don't know what to do. Amy, this is my opinion, but people can take it for what it's worth. I think the very best thing that could happen right now is the Republicans lose, because the Republicans are not going to fix this problem. The Republicans have no idea this problem exists. They don't care about this problem. They're not paying attention to it. They have driven us so far off course from doing anything productive to stop the left that I really think that in order to have any hope of fighting back against this, the Republicans need to lose. Trump needs to lose. The conservative movement, the Republican Party as it currently stands, needs to be figuratively burnt to the ground. And if they lose this election, it will have a massive impact on their ability to function as a movement. And that means that would it mean some short-term pain? Yes. But long-term, it would mean that a new approach, a new philosophy would be able to have the opportunity to flourish. And so I think that we should, I'm going to vote for Chase Oliver, not because I think Chase Oliver is perfect, because I don't, but I think that, I'm either going to vote for Chase Oliver or I'm not going to vote at all. I'm not voting for Donald Trump. I'm not voting for Joe Biden because I don't think the Republicans deserve my votes. I'm certainly not going to vote for the Democrat. So that's what I'm going to do, probably. But I think that Republicans need to stop voting for the lesser of two evils. That's what's gotten them in this mess in the first place. All right, guys, we got about 15 minutes left of this presentation. So everyone, congrats for everyone hanging in so far. As a reminder, this is actually going to work out perfectly because at 10 p.m. on my channel, I will be premiering, I guess, the great big tech unhinged meltdown from last night. If you didn't see this last night or haven't seen it today, big tech lost his fucking mind because he is a petty, petulant child. And I have the clip of that, and we're going to play it, and I do a little introduction to bring, if you don't know what's going on, I do a little introduction to bring everyone up to speed and to explain the context of it. And that's going to be about a 2.5-hour stream. So it's not going to be live. It is a premiere. Because I don't want to do it live, because if I do it live, he's going to stream snipe me. It's going to be a whole thing, and blah, 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 blah. It's exactly what he wants. But that is going to be premiering, and guys, that is going to be the last time I'm going to talk about this, because no, I'm not going to play your clip, Yasmin. I'm sorry. I'm just not going to do it. And I appreciate you. Don't think I don't appreciate you going on and talking to him, but we need to stop, because this is what he wants. He wants the attention. This is all he has. And so we need to stop. Like, after today, I mean, you're going to see his unhinged meltdown, and it's pretty ridiculous. And so after today, we're just going to stop talking about it, and we're going to move on with what we do. This is my fault. I've talked about it way more times than I should have. Anyway, we're going to finish up this stream. This is going to be perfect because it's going to roundabout us in around 10 o'clock. You guys can watch the premiere if you want. I will probably be hanging out in the chat. And that's all she wrote. That's all we're going to do.
Class, right? This is a real mistake that occurred in the women's liberation moment, where a cultural feminist turn started, de-linking from the left, de-linking from anti-capitalism, and de-linking from class, and just sort of denying that there are internal class antagonisms between women, within the sisterhood, just to be clear. But what I think is useful is understanding that feminization as a process that orders bodies in a way that kind of affects a devaluation, like as Rosemary Hennessy calls this, a sort of like a second skin. And it's not about, having a certain set of genitals or so on.
Hey, we're glad you found us, Amy.
It's about the sort of, in fact, a really good way to think about feminization as an economic phenomenon is to look at trans sex workers and their the sort of extractive abandonment, I think is a phrase that some Marxists use to explain how the sort of making surplus via feminization of certain populations can be very productive for capitalism and for the state. But feminization is something that can be thought of as a sort of almost like a classing, like a classing of bodies that is fluid and it's not kind of dependable. But you can use it, I think, to think about people within nuclear households who are exposed to violence within the family. Like, I haven't talked about violence as much as I should, because it's not just privatization of labor.
I'll add you when I get the chance, Yasmin, I promise.
In the family, it's also violence which comes internally in the family and is also
hang on. Baby Queen says, can you please cover the attack on liberal feminism? They literally call it bourgeois feminism. Yeah, they do. I think they use they do, because socialists hate the left, the neoliberals, more than they hate the right. I don't know, Baby Queen, do you have something you suggest I watch? Like, is there a resource for this specifically? I can look into it.
Buttressed by external violence, right? This sort of state racist terror that makes it very difficult to exit the family. There are economic factors that contribute, but there's also frankly forms of violence that tear families apart under the name of the family, funnily enough, right? When you have people at the border being kind of separated from one another, you know, children and parents, the only response we have as a left, kind of understandably, is keep families together, you know, stop family separations, which, you know, it gets the message across, you know, because it's a response on the terms of the state's attempt to say, you know, if we admitted you as a real family, you would be honored, and you would be, you know, in America we respect families, right? Which is, again, a massive racialized lie, right? Like it only is operative for some people, some populations more specifically in America, right? And so targeting kin relationships at the border is actually part of the family regime. It's one of the forms of violence that sort of makes people feel, you know, that there is no alternative, you know, paradoxically. Just to be completely clear, you know, like the border guards aren't somehow abolishing the family by disrespecting family bonds. They're actually operating on the logic of the family's sort of sanctity.
Because she's not opposed to, like, she's not opposed to people making the choice to do that. She wants to abolish the family as a structural institution. So I think people are inclined to look at things as, like, as individualists do. Most of the people watching this, we're going to be individualists. We think about in terms of, like, the small unit, right? Socialists don't think in terms of the small unit. They think about the collective, the systemic, the structure. And so that's what she's looking at. She's looking at the structural level, not like, she doesn't care if people make the choice to live with their biological kin. What she cares about is biological kinship not being the determinant of what resources you have access to in society. Does that make sense? Excuse me. Yeah, I'm picking up what you're putting down, Human Centipede.
But yeah, I think, you know, yeah, gosh, what more can I say? Yeah, I realize I've that was a very diffuse answer. I realize there's other things we need to get to. So, yeah, yeah. I think, just to reiterate, different sort of people within a household are structurally exposed to internal violence, and you can think of that internal violence as a site where perhaps it makes sense to talk about, like, you know, a solidarity, a natural solidarity between, let's say, women, children, you know, queer, trans, gender non-conforming people. I sometimes feel like pointing to the statistical fact that marriage is still very, very clearly beneficial to heterosexual cis men. So, you know, men live longer when they are married. Women live less long when they are married. When a heterosexual married couple gets sick, you know, if it's the woman who has a terminal illness, it tends to be then that the man divorces her and walks away from her care. When it is the man who gets terminally ill, the woman almost never divorces him in that moment, right? There are these kinds of statistical elements of the labor division that marriage ultimately is, right, organizes, even though neoliberalism has changed a lot about social reproduction, and, you know, marriage is no longer explicitly a property institution, you know, like wives are no longer property per se, you know, but the broad brushstrokes of that sort of private public labor division still obtain, you know, and still, you know, basically boost the longevity of certain populations at the expense of others.
Okay, great. So if you have time for one more question, is there any sitting there that you want to point to? Unfortunately, we're not getting to all of the questions, but we have a couple outstanding. But
I noticed a really personal question, and I would be happy to even just sort of, affirm it and listen to it, even if I don't have very concrete answers. But I noticed the person who said that they were wondering if I have advice about how to find, on a more immediate basis, people who are interested in giving and receiving care, or even interested in family abolition. I'm a queer single parent drowning under the burden of doing it all alone. I've been working for 2 years to connect with others and try to build quote unquote community, but it seems everyone is too busy with their own families, and I've had very little luck. I'm so tired of being lonely and overburdened.
I shouldn't sit like that. That's horrible.
As I say, I didn't want to ignore this, and I don't have a lot of sort of really concrete advice per se, but I feel like this experience is one that I hear a lot.
Like
people
telling
in my
myself,
life,
sit up straight.
People outside of my immediate life have expressed really, really similar experiences. I think, there was a moment earlier in the year where appetite still existed for experimenting with alternative forms, perhaps trying to start breaking down some of the institutions that naturalize, the ultra privatization of our lives, the ultra atomization of our lives. But I think there was also a pendulum swing back to like normalization, like an appetite for normal, which is quite depressing, I think, for some of us. I don't know where you're speaking from, friend, but it's, I think, important to recognize that in cities where...
So this is actually a great question, Lisa. Lisa says, new to this, welcome, we're glad you're here. I'm curious about something, and it's probably been brought up before, so I apologize. No, guys, I always welcome questions from new people. It's when people come here repeatedly and then they ask the same question over and over and over again that I start to get annoyed. But if you're a new person, ask away. Don't worry about it. If someone in her utopia commits a crime, how does that work? There is no police, no prison. Okay. So firstly, they really do believe that if they institute a society based on equity, then that will eliminate crime. Now, I'm not saying I agree with them. But we're not debunking that, right? Because debunking doesn't work. They believe that if they create a society in which everyone has access to all the resources they need, they have access to a place to live, they have access to food, they have access to state-funded, all of this is state-funded by the government. They have access to education, energy, healthcare, whatever they need, then they believe that that will basically eliminate all crime because there will be no need to commit crime if you have access to everything you need. I have seen them talk about kind of like community systems for policing. You even see at the campus protests where they instantly form their own security squad. They use like community tactics to keep people out that they don't want there. So there are things that they will be doing. They will have some sort of like security force, but it won't be the police as you currently understand it. It's going to be something different.
Rents are really high, and the cost of living is unbearable, and work is crushing people at an exceptionally high rate, that there is less, time, literally, that in people's hands, right? So, that's easy to say, but if you feel like the time has come to explore, different like locations where the boot of wage labor is less sort of heavily pressing down on people's necks, then you might find that there is more connection to be had. I found that myself in my life. I wish I could explain I really do how the sort of organized loneliness that this mode of production generates could be undone. I just don't know. Many of the solutions that people want to hear when editors ask me to write about this in a sort of unscary way, I think they really want to hear about bourgeois co-parenting solutions and things. But actually it's working class people who often innovate some of the most sort of creative, because of necessity, sort of ways of figuring out care responsibilities and burdens, and distributing labor, which is what anti-work often is in the domain of care. When I say anti-work, I mean a horizon that doesn't call for automation or sort of stopping doing things, because with care, frequently people say what we need is more care, and it's not exactly that I disagree, but I think what needs to happen when we talk about care is that we understand what we care for and why in this world, which is dominated by a sort of religion of productivity, a religion of work, and which very specifically cares in certain ways for certain ends, and so I want to have conversations that are willing to talk about the worlds and the relations, and perhaps even the people, the classes that we wish to care for less or even not at all, and ask kind of about the qualitative dimensions of the care that we want to organize, not just the sort of the amount, because socially reproducing people is something we want to make visible as work, but not because that's a good thing. Like, reproducing the world is actually...
How can I say Trump won't fix this? Because none of the solutions are going to fix this. Parental choice is not going to fix this. The only thing that will even put a dent in this is the immediate abolition of all public schools. Trump isn't going to do that. I strongly doubt that Trump is even going to abolish the Department of Education. He claims he's going to, but he could have done it in his first term. Trump doesn't even understand what critical race theory is. The executive order that Trump issued in his first term did nothing to stop critical race theory at all. Republicans in general have no idea what the real problems are because they're constantly focused on things that don't matter. So there is no indication to me that Trump is going to do anything that will make any impact on this problem at all. And I know that's not what people want to hear. I really do get it. If Trump came out with a specific commitment of policies and proposals that I thought were actually going to have an impact, look at this freeze frame from Sophie. This is like the greatest Sophie freeze frame of all time. But if, no joke, if I actually thought that Trump was going to be able to solve any part of this problem, he would have my vote, no questions asked. But Trump has given me literally zero indication that he understands the problem, that he's going to put policies in place to solve the problem, that he's made any sort of real commitment to doing anything productive at all. So he still has time. I strongly doubt that. Trump actually looks worse now than he did in his first term. Trump doesn't look better to me right now. Trump looks worse. Anyway, we only got a couple more minutes.
Something that I wouldn't want to own up to participating in, because the world is extremely violent. And, this is also part
I just
of
finished my beer too.
Motherhood
Perfect
in
timing.
a very unromantic way, right? Mothers have helped build empire. Mothers have helped build eugenic regimes. Mothers are very much part of holding up patriarchy, right? The institution of motherhood itself, according to Adrian Rich and others.
The institution of motherhood itself holds up patriarchy. It holds up the gender binary.
In the 70s is patriarchal. This is why mothering against motherhood is a sort of anti-patriarchal insurgency against a patriarchal institution. So when you won't find necessarily already married couples who are turning their backs from you, willing to kind of experiment like this. But you might find in surprising places like, I don't know, substance abuse support groups, or you know, like community kitchens, places where people are already sharing resources. You know, in my neighborhood there are really awesome kind of like you know, food sharing resources and sort of community pantries and things, and I think people meet through those. And you might find that you know, the appetite for resource sharing turns into, you know, an appetite for
no, they're very pro-sex. They're not
labor fusing. I hope you hang in there. It's kind of a depressing season and a depressing moment. I hope this hasn't been too rough on everybody. I think family abolition is simultaneously quite an exciting horizon that sometimes makes people feel really good, and I get lots of messages to that effect, even kind of showing me how it has helped people survive inside really nuclear settings. Like I get people sending me pictures of my books with babies, or in maternity wards and birthing suites and breakfast tables full of children's sort of spoons and forks. But I also find that it sometimes awakens people to realizations about trauma and deficit, and a sense of you know, the scale of the problem. I really am grateful to all of you for your attention and your great questions, and to Miranda, who I believe has somewhat of a cold and has been battling through it for my sake, to host me here with such attention and skill. That perhaps I should let her get off screen and into bed on this wintry Tuesday night.
So with that, yes, I am a little sick, but it's okay. That's why we're on Zoom. But this has been a wonderful conversation. Thank you.
All right, I guess we are done, guys. You did it. This is like one of our greatest Abolish the Family episodes ever. I'm really glad that we went back and watched this episode because there was so much good stuff in it. I got a whole bunch of clips that I'm really excited about. Does anyone have any final questions about any of this? Okay, so how are the newbies feeling? The people who've been here for the first time, this is your first Abolish the Family content. How are you guys feeling about this? Yeah, it's perfect timing. The premiere is going to start in 4 minutes. So let me know in the chat how you're feeling about it. As a reminder, guys, I do take Sundays off because, you know, sometimes I need to take a day off too. But we will be doing movie night in the supporter Discord tomorrow night at 8 p.m. We'll be watching Jurassic Park, the classic, iconic blockbuster of my childhood. And if you want to join us for that, you can sign up on the Substack for $8 a month, $80 a year. I will be sending out a newsletter that looks a little bit like this. Actually, you can currently get to the supporter perks by going to this email. This one right here, it's actually currently up. And then you scroll all the way down to the bottom, and underneath that red box, you're going to find a link to the supporter Discord. I will be sending out another email tomorrow, hopefully. But yeah, it should be tomorrow. Basically with the same thing. It's kind of like a weekly wrap up of the content that I've made. That will have links to my 2 community Zoom calls that I do every week on Monday and Wednesday. It'll have links to the supporter Discord. It'll have links to whatever else is going on. So you can find all that there. You can come and join us for movie night tomorrow at 8 p.m. Eastern time. And of course, please stick around. The premiere of Big Tech's Unhinged Meltdown. Hang on. This right here. Because that's actually what he looks like. He likes to wear a disguise now because for some reason he's hiding his face, probably due to a dramatic lack of self-worth and self-respect. Because really, like, I'm older than Big Tech and I'm not covering up my face on the internet. He's gonna say she's using all these deceptive angles to make herself look good because she's a fat cow and blah, 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 blah. But like my webcam's like right in front of me. It's just hanging off my computer monitor. There's no like deceptive angle. It's just literally right in front of me. But that's actually what he looks like, just in case people were wondering. And so that is going to start in 3 minutes time. And so if you want to see the full Big Tech Unhinged Meltdown premiere, this is not live. I will not be doing this live because that's what he wanted. He even mentioned it last night. He was so desperate for me to do it live. But no. I don't need to do it live. all I need to do is clip his exchange from last night's Politically Provoked and let it speak for itself. So you guys have fun with that. The premiere starts in 60 seconds, and I will see you for movie night tomorrow, guys. Take care. Have a good one. We'll see you soon. Bye.